Thank you very much. Good afternoon, councillors, and welcome to the afternoon session of the budget for 2022. Can I ask Danny to do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. So members, as with this morning, when I call your name, if you can just let me know whether you're present in the meeting. Councillor Hearn.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Deputy Provost.
Present.
Councillor Barnacle.
Present.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Present.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Present.
Councillor Braun.
Present.
Councillor Brock.
Present.
Councillor Audrey Coates.
Present.
Councillor Harry Coates.
Present.
Councillor Donaldson.
Present.
Councillor Drysdale.
Present.
Councillor Duff.
Present.
Councillor Forbes.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Present.
Councillor Illingworth.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Jarvis.
Here.
Councillor Lang.
Still there.
Still here, just very quiet. Sorry, mute button problem.
No problem. Right there, Councillor Lang. Councillor Lyle.
Present.
Councillor Massey.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Good afternoon.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
Councillor McDade.
Present.
Councillor McEwen.
Present.
Provost.
Present.
Councillor Parrott.
Yeah.
Councillor Pulver.
Present.
Councillor Purvis.
Present.
Councillor Rebeck.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Robertson.
Present.
Councillor Sarwat.
Present.
Councillor Shires.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
Councillor Smith.
Good afternoon and present.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Waters.
Present.
Councillor Williamson.
Present.
And Councillor Wilson.
Present.
Okay, so that should be everyone in attendance, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the debate. So can I ask members when they wish to speak to please put a C in the chat box, and remember you can only speak for 5 minutes. Please do not attempt to go over the 5 minutes or we will just cut you off. Thank you. So I'm waiting. I don't see anybody in the chat box wanting to speak at the moment. So Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Happy to start things off.
Thank you.
Yet again, we have a Tory budget which ignores the real needs of the people of Perth and Kinross. We have millions sitting in a COVID reserve. Now is the time to spend those reserves. For those who have struggled and scrimped and saved and survived the last 2 years, they need the benefit of that money now. We have a group of Lib Dems who are the first to complain about the Scottish Government not passing on funds, but they haven't even got the imagination to spend all the funds we do have. No doubt they will again today prop up the Tory administration, who have given us a stale budget that does not little to alleviate poverty, would lose 6 primary teachers and leave our levels of supply teachers vulnerable, not to mention the lack of direction for our climate crisis measures. In contrast, the SNP group presents today a fully costed, bold budget amendment which will make the biggest impact for the everyday pressures those of us who live in the real world are facing in 2022. 1 million for puffin crossings and road safety measures. In my ward, this would make a huge impact on our busy roads which often go right through the centre of Strathmore's towns and villages. We will address rural exclusion by piloting a weekend late night bus scheme. We will substantially invest in our local action partnerships, £600,000 for crucial local empowerment, facilitating participatory democracy and ensuring revenue streams go where local folk actually want it to go. In addition to this, the SNP budget would see a 7.5% uplift of support to voluntary community groups, This means a wide range of projects and groups would get an all-important breathing space from their budget pressures. The pandemic has only exacerbated an increasing level of mental health issues, and the SNP budget will put 100,000 towards mental health initiatives. Instead of burying our head in the sand about the impact of COVID, we are taking steps to mitigate it. Not only that, but we have included over 700,000 to support the work of the Welfare Rights Team, who offer critical assistance as we mitigate the cruel system of universal credit and other Tory Westminster policies that have debt and other deductions into the system, leaving people more vulnerable than they were when they first got the support. Lastly, I wish to highlight the impressive 1 million dedicated to tackling the climate emergency. With additional officer support, innovative technological projects, and an altogether creative and proactive approach to the biggest issue facing our world today. Not to mention an extra 75,000 in direct support to increasing biodiversity, the SNP budget yet again delivers for people and place. A budget amendment I will be proud to vote for. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. This will be my final budget process for Perth and Kinross Council, and as in the last 5 years, again, the Conservative administration has included economic development at the forefront of our political aspirations for the area. We've seen many businesses put current work processes, aspirations and existing plans on hold for the last 2 years, but equally in this time, we've seen business adaptation, forced expansion into different and online markets, and a continued investment by business owners at a monumental high. It has seen many owners financially stretched beyond all recognition, just trying to keep independent businesses going in the area and to keep as many locals employed as possible. Now, it's important to recognise that the household factors are ever present for residents of our council area. There's a rise in household bills, including petrol, heating and food, but we're elected to make decisions, hard ones, to ensure that council services are still met and that we're responsible in the financial plans for the future, all the while minding what is expected by our residents when they pay their council tax, a tax they work hard to pay. It's about the balance. It's easy to grab a headline and to band around percentages both up and down like you're handing out sweeties. But all the opposition budget proposals start from the premise that the people of Perth and Kinross will all have the same money earned in their pockets this year as in years gone by. That the job market is stable and assured for these percentages to make a difference not only in the households but for prudent financial planning for the council. Deputy Provost, we know that stability is simply not the case for so many of our residents. Our high streets have never been under so much pressure. Change in buying habits sped on by lockdowns has removed people from our town centres. Her hospitality industry, a core source of employment within Perth and Kinross, has been messed around beyond belief, and many are needing enhancement support just to survive. To assume that family income is stable and on a sure footing, well, I believe that's reckless to the extreme. There's a definite lack of business support from the budget proposals in front of us today. The SNP and Labour independent proposals has no or little support respectively to help. No grants, no funding for people to get a job, to secure a job or to advance within that job. And unfortunately, we'll have them moving away and living elsewhere rather than enjoying what Perth and Kinross has to offer. It's a long-held Conservative belief that there should be help for those that want to help themselves, and the economic proposals in this Conservative budget will do that. As I've already mentioned, there's a swift move towards online markets, and the support for Business Fund, helping small businesses to gain that online presence or enhance an updated existing site, will be most needed, and I'm delighted to support it. I've mentioned that our high streets are declining, and it's so important that we change the look, purpose and future of the buildings in our towns. That's why I'm happy to see the Adapt Your Property Fund, 300,000 to convert underused or vacant town commercial space. Allowing funding for up to 50% of the costs will see an immediate change to the use of properties and encourage inward investment from the private sector. This, coupled with the Open for Business Fund, where again grants will be awarded for 50% of costs to update and revamp the frontage of a premises, well, it will work well. This fund was exceptionally well received, and as with all well-structured policies, it's captured the imagination of property owners and I'm glad to see this initiative continuing for another year with 200,000 set aside. These forms of funding will encourage a drastic change to our towns and village centres and will enhance owner investment to give a much needed boost to business offerings in our high street. Deputy Provost, I would like to also draw attention to the Business Accelerator programme, which complements Business Gateway, delivers high growth in start-up businesses. And lastly, on economic development, Provost, it's important to highlight the Perth and Kinross Skills Passport, where we've invested to help get people back into work. This funding to help access training courses and equipment will go a long way into getting people into the job market. The administration budget and the need for financial planning with support to build financial planning security into the future, and I heartily support it. Thank you.
We now have Councillor Liz Barrett.
Thank you. Councillors, last week our councillors received an assessment of the impact of council budget proposals on equality across Perth and Kinross, and very many of those impacts will be negative on those already suffering from inequalities. We in the Lib Dems believe in making life fairer for all and reducing inequality, not increasing it. Our approach to the budget has been to transform the way the council works so that we can do more with less and involve our communities more, to protect care and services and share opportunities with those who are struggling and not just with those who are not, and to use the council tax lever while we're being allowed to do so. Above all, we're realistic. I'm quite frankly horrified by the financial impact of the budgets proposed this morning. Today, we're facing an underlying deficit in the budget of 7.6 million. That's a structural deficit, the legacy of 10 years of SNP council tax freezes. Even after the usual pantomime of finding some money behind the sofa, the SNP Green government cut 250 million from council budgets across Scotland. It's restricting what we can do with the funds it is allocating, and it's not passing on the funds it's received from Westminster to cover things like the NIC increase. Councillor Sarwar referred to the council's COVID reserve, which has been set aside over the last 2 years to support our recovery, and we know that will take some years, and I'm saying nothing here about the additional pressures caused by Brexit as well as COVID. Just now, that whole reserve stands at just over 9 million. The Conservatives have only balanced their budget by refusing to accept the clear pressures presented by inflation and the huge rises in energy costs. Councillor McCall just claimed to have been prudent in their approach, but that is just not prudent, to put it mildly, in these challenging times. There are also nifty sleights of hand in their arrangements, like where they reject the Business Accelerator pressure and then trumpet generously putting it back as new spending on a non-recurring basis. They seem to be doing the same thing in putting 100,000 into food insecurity, a non-recurring cost, by raiding the climate change pressures. And on top of the cavalier approach to the pressures, they've raided over $1 million from the COVID reserve. I'll be honest and say that there are many things in the SNP's budget that we would love to have included in ours. But as their election giveaway list can't be paid for with council tax, they plan to raid an eye-watering 7.8 million from the COVID reserve, which would leave only 1.3 million to support us in future years. This is not the time to be going on a big spending spree, and this is not a sensible approach. And the Labour Independent Group are quite happy to completely wipe out the reserve. They don't seem to understand or care that once it's gone, it's gone. Ours is the only budget that doesn't impact on the COVID reserve. I'd just like to say a little about the provisions we have included in our budget. The Lib Dems believe in supporting young people and providing opportunities for all of them. We join with others in opposing the cuts to school crossing patrollers and swimming lessons and any reduction in the modern apprenticeship opportunities. We need to ensure we have enough supply teachers when they're needed and that pupils and teachers can get to school safely in winter on our roads. We're calling for increased funding in the economic wellbeing plan to help young people to get started in work and in business. We also believe
that you're approaching time.
Thank you. We're also increasing funding for supporting community initiatives across the board, and particularly look forward to the Eating Well, Living Well community fund initiatives to reduce food waste and increase the use of local food with healthier living and setting up cook-it schemes. We know that residents are really concerned about road safety, but there's no point in us committing millions of pounds as proposed by the SNP budget that the council departments have told us they won't be able to spend in a one-year budget. We do hope resources can be found to address the many road safety projects across Perth and Kinross. Our funding for the Safer Communities team will enable them to invest in more pop-up policemen, which are proven to discourage speeding, and another speed recording machine for wardens and communities to welcome more community involvement. The Safer Communities funding will also enable trialling of a new solar waterless loo cabin to help with visitor management in our beautiful country areas and to provide home safety equipment to more vulnerable residents. And lastly, we are completely committed to tackling the climate emergency, and that's why we've committed additional funding to implement the action plan items. We need to improve our council buildings as soon as we can to provide warm and efficient energy efficient homes for all our council tenants, speed up our switch to cleaner transport and work with our communities in the private sector to get Perth and Kinross to net zero as soon as we can. The Lib Dem amendment prevents a fair, reasonable
Councillor Barrett,
and sustainable
that's
budget.
time up.
I
Councillor
urge you to
Barrett.
support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I think because councillors are all speaking really to the maximum time, I'm going to be giving you a warning when you've got a minute to go so that you maybe get your final statement in. So I hope you don't mind. I'm learning as I go along, so that's the learning for the day. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I won't blather on for 5 minutes, but wish to support the SNP amendment presented by Councillor Grant Lane and seconded by Councillor Eric Drysdale. The Conservative motion kicked off with the mandatory SNP bad and allegations underfunding by Scottish Government. Oh yes, SNP bad. Now where did I hear that before? Just last week and widely reported at the Planning and Development Management meeting, Liberal Democrats and Conservative councillors took a wild swipe at Transport Scotland for allegedly failing to upgrade Broxden roundabout. Let's be clear, we all need to be clear. These guys conveniently forget that due to devolution arrangement, it is currently not in Scotland's gift to benefit fully from our own resources. The fact is that Scotland's councils and services must make do with what the Westminster Government deems appropriate for services in councils in Scotland in proportion to what is provided for those south of the border. Meanwhile, surpluses from our resources held by Westminster are spent on whatever Westminster deem appropriate, whether HS2, the Trident monstrosity in central Scotland, or other such commitments, wanted or not, or helpful or not, to Scotland. What local authorities can do, and must do, is see that our rural transport infrastructure, roads, gullies, embankments and bridges are properly financed and maintained. Issues clearly neglected in recent years, but high priority within the SNP proposal for investment in non-trunk road transport infrastructure. Many bridges suffer need of repair, none more so than on the A823 in Glendevon, where residents and users have been mounting a steep humpback temporary replacement since floods in August 2020. I commend the Scottish National Party amendment and trust that common sense will prevail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. We, like the other 31 local authorities across Scotland, exist to provide the basic everyday services to the population at a level that they would expect. Well-resourced and valued for money, an important role. However, as in previous years, the Scottish Government fails to recognise this and continually reduces funding to all local authorities whilst wasting taxpayers' money elsewhere, funding another unnecessary referendum when recovery should be the main aim. And now we find that they spend some 9 million on spin doctors and press officers. This is not the way to run a country. Councillor Drysdale entertained us in full election mode, giving great defence to the Scottish Government. But when every local authority is struggling with deficits, that defence, I think, seems to falter. And it would have been nice of him, when quoting figures as he did, to have acknowledged the millions sent from Westminster to help our citizens during the pandemic. Conveniently forgotten as usual. Deputy Provost, our budget has been put together against the backdrop of increasing inflation, unseen like this for years, and for many, never seen before, and the resulting pressures that this will bring on family finances. A way that we can help, and help quickly, is to limit council tax rise. But in doing so, we must be mindful of the effect on our reserves, the fact that council services will also be affected by the very same inflationary forces, and of course, the desire to meet new or increased demands on the council support to our communities. There was some hope from economists that this level of inflation would be short-lived and will not be a reflection of the 1970s. However, the situation in Ukraine and East Europe may well cause reassessment of this. With that in mind, we have settled on a 2.5% rise in this year's council tax. I know we, and I'm sure the public, would have preferred 0% to ease the burden, but to do so would have dangerously exposed the council to unpredictable financial forces, and that would not have been prudent. In this instance, I believe we have found the correct balance for the best outcome, recognising the ongoing deficit and retaining necessary reserves, reflecting the uncertainty in today's economic climate. Financial pressure on family budgets can cause increased stress, which can result in the unfortunate rise in domestic abuse. This is a fear raised by Perthshire Women's Aid, and I'm pleased that we have been able to offer a further £30,000 in addition to the recurring £25,000 already available to them. With this extra funding, I'm sure that they will be able to help both women and children who present as victims of violence in the home. Likewise, we have included another £30,000 to assist RASAC in order that they too can aid the increasing number of victims of these terrible crimes. This will enable them to avoid cutbacks in service and allow them to continue their excellent work. The Community Investment Fund has been a major success since its inception by this administration. In my ward particularly, each round of grant funding has been oversubscribed, well oversubscribed. Applications from local groups awarded by local people. However, rising prices, particularly energy prices, are something which will affect all of us, including many of those local groups who work so hard to improve our communities. To offer some assistance here, we have increased the funds available to the Community Investment Fund for this year by £100,000, bringing the total for the coming financial year to £400,000. A change in criteria will allow groups to apply for assistance towards energy costs. Furthermore, I'm pleased that we have been able to allocate a sum of £30,000 for the installation of lighting along a path leading from Rafferty Primary School to Glendevon Court in Ferguson Park. This has been requested by residents over some years and is on the list of works, but until now, funds have never been available. This is in the spirit of creating safer communities. Also, I'm glad that we are able to reject the proposal to close the public toilets in Blair Gallery. Undoubtedly, those who have used this facility, sometimes in desperation, will be pleased to know it is staying. At a cost ratio of 50p to 1, it is still a good deal. And finally, may I correct Councillor Drysdale in one thing. Boris
1
Johnson,
minute to go, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Boris Johnson is not my boss. We are in Scotland and we are Scottish Conservatives, and I don't have one boss. I have thousands and always have had, the people of Perth and Kinross. Deputy Provost, I will be supporting this motion, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Pover.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'm only going to highlight one particular area, and I'm not necessarily going to speak for a long time, so you'll be glad to hear that. I'm just actually going to highlight the proposed 3% inflationary increase in fees for foster carer and kinship carers. And I'd just like to obviously note that the cost of living has increased generally for kinship and carers, as Councillor Sarwar has outlined, and this has affected foster carers and kinship carers in the same way as everybody else. And I just want to point out it's hard enough to recruit and maintain foster carer numbers, particularly when councils are fishing in the same pool as independent agencies. So I just want to actually highlight and support the SNP amendment, which proposes a 5% increase in funding for carers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ahern.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost, and thank you for allowing me to show my support for this Scottish Conservative administration's budget. Despite the real-term reduction in funding from the Scottish Government to local authorities this year and the increase in ring-fence funding, and by the way, nothing in that statement is not true, we in this Scottish Conservative administration have come up with a budget that supports our local communities. I very much welcome the £100,000 investment in food security, which will help us to support and maintain valuable initiatives that will continue to ensure that everyone in our communities are able to get access to food, as well as teach food management and cooking skills to families. This support was vital during the pandemic, and this money will help to ensure that this support continues. I also welcome the £50,000 for the promotion of digital inclusion that will continue the work already taking place. This additional funding will help to ensure that many more people in our communities have access and, more importantly, the ability to gain skills to use that technology. We're in a changing world that relies more and more on the use of this technology, and this money can be used to fund digital skills courses through Perth College. allow those without access to printers to print anywhere to printers within our CPK facilities, and enable work with our tenants to access internet services. The funds will also help to ensure that services moving online can be accessed by all those that need to. I welcome the £40,000 that will be used to finish renovations and work on the North Muirton Community Centre, which is in my ward. The Community Council have raised funds over the last couple of years, which has enabled them to carry out work internally, which includes purchasing and updating the kitchen facilities, and work on this will commence shortly. The toilets have also been completely refurbished and now includes a new separate disabled toilet. This additional money will be used to replace the external cladding, remove asbestos and provide a brand new entrance door to the hall. And when all the work is completed, will provide a much refreshed building in the heart of the community that has been needed for a very long time with much better facilities. Lastly, and has already been mentioned by my colleague, Councillor Braun, I very much welcome the £30,000 funding to both Women's Aid and RASAC, services that are unfortunately needed now more than ever. I welcome the thought that has gone into this administration's budget, and I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ahern. Councillor Rebecca.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. If I can start by being slightly parochial and thank colleagues in the SG group for supporting Councillor Massey and I's efforts in delivering a woodland walk around 7 Acres Park. Football is already a thriving activity at 7 Acres, with 300 or 400 youngsters every week enjoying exercise and fresh air, as well as 3 adult teams. And if I can shamelessly big up Latham Juniors at this point, who sit comfortably mid-table in the Midlands League in their first season in semi-pro football. But the club is determined that 7 Acres is not just for football, that it's for all the community, and a proper path around the perimeter and through the wooded area at 7 Acres will make a big difference locally. In terms of the budget more broadly, it is true that money's tight for everyone, and there are many reasons for that, too numerous to go into at this point. But 2 of the main reasons are COVID, which is nobody's fault, and Brexit, which is, well, we'll know whose fault that is, quite frankly. And from Perth and Kinross' point of view, I'm delighted to set some funds, extra funds for welfare support and the provision of extra staff in the welfare rights support team to deliver that. Many constituents in Perth and North are already suffering with the indignity of universal credit and the indignity of in-work poverty. And we need to help now as the cost of living gets worse. From an education point of view, we've supported and increased the budget for swimming lessons quite rightly. We've rejected the idea of losing 6 full-time equivalent primary teachers and rejected cuts to the supply contingency budget, which is likely to affect smaller primary schools in particular. And I also support our £1 million fund for puffing crossings and infrastructure around school exclusion zones, which I believe will be of great benefit to the residents of Gillespie and School Close next to Tulloch Primary. And finally, I'd like to remind colleagues that restricted funds are still real money. For example, the newly built Latham Nursery, delivered by this council, absolutely, but funded by Scottish Government money is very real. It's certainly real every time I walk past it, which is most days. And built by money that the Tories and Lib Dems here imply is worthless. Well, it's not. It's real money. The Scottish Government has invested £24 million over the last 5 years from my calculations in Perth and Kinross for early years childcare expansion, which helps children get off to the best possible start in life and helps to mitigate the worst effects of in-work poverty, which we've already mentioned. And millions more we have invested in extra teachers and for school meal provision. Something, incidentally, that I think a future SNP administration, if that comes to pass, will review. As I say, this is real money. Ring-fence money absolutely benefits the people of Perth and Kinross, despite criticism for some councillors. It is legitimate for the Scottish Government to deliver manifesto promises that people voted for in large numbers and fund them appropriately. And perhaps where the confusion arises, because successive Westminster governments have been shown to rarely deliver what's promised pre-election. And lastly, COVID is now, so we need to spend COVID money now. That's entirely appropriate. I commend the SNP amendment to Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Illingworth.
Great, thank you, Deputy Provost. I'd like to start with talking about 3 initiatives in the Conservative motion. First of all, £30,000 to In Bloom and cemetery groups, £50,000 to the YMCA project in the centre of Perth, and £80,000 for the volunteer upskilling fund. What those three valuable initiatives have in common is that it's supporting grassroots community groups. Now, every councillor knows that a sense of community is really important. Where people have a sense of community, where people feel they belong, all sorts of really good things happen. You get less loneliness, less litter, less vandalism, even better school results. So these are three really good initiatives. The second part of my wee blurb is to talk about how proud I am of this Conservative motion. Firstly, it respects how hard people work to pay their council tax by giving a 2.5 less than inflation increase in the council tax. I think that's important. Secondly, it protects public services in Perth and Kinross. Thirdly, it protects our reserves. Now, reserves are important. We need reserves not only because we've got a substantial inherent deficit in a substantial black hole, and we need to deal with that. We also need to be aware that we're about to spend quite a lot of money. We're going to see a large increase in our capital budget. That we need to be aware of, and we need to have that flexibility. To drain the resources is irresponsible. Now, the SNP motion, amendment, excuse me, is utterly irresponsible. It's blatant electioneering. It is a case of speaking to the electorate, vote for us and to hell with the consequences. It is completely nonsense. So to sum up, Deputy Provost, I will be supporting the Conservative amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. In this SNP budget, we address some of the challenges facing us as we take steps in meeting our 2045 net zero targets. We are committed to a green transition, one that will enhance our economy and build a more sustainable and resilient Perth and Kinross. To achieve this, the SNP are committing over £1 million. As we see the stresses put on our residents, largely due to the increased cost of living, especially in energy costs, we have set aside £250,000 to support trials in providing innovative green heating solutions for houses. A great example of this is the new innovative solution developed by Thermify that combines heating solutions for the houses while processing data on the cloud, making the amount of energy used facilitate two complementary tasks. The Rumbling Bridge Community Hydro Society near Crook of Devon is an exemplar of how a community can contribute to meeting our net zero commitments while benefiting the community they serve. The society built a community-owned 500 kilowatts hydro scheme on the River Devon that is contributing sustainable green energy while benefiting the local community with tens of thousands of pounds supporting local facilities and events. These type of schemes will help us meet our net zero commitments while benefiting our communities. As such, the SNP budget will commit £300,000 to support feasibility support grants for local community-led renewable energy development. In Scotland, we see clear unfairness where Scottish energy producers are charged a penalty for every kilowatt of energy they supply to the national grid, while in Wales and the south of England, energy producers are given money to supply energy to the grid, a system that puts Scotland's renewable energy at a clear disadvantage. While in this council, we currently have no ability to change this Westminster practice, we do have the ability to set aside £100,000 to fund feasibility proposals to set up private grid systems, which will specifically be aimed at green energy produced locally that benefits local energy supply, providing efficient, low-cost, clean energy. Having a circular economy has two main benefits. We'll help reduce our carbon footprint while finding innovative ways of extending the life of products and materials, getting the full life cycle out of purchased goods. This can be through reuse, repair and recycling, reducing the waste we produce. There is also benefits around the local economy by providing more local jobs. This SNP budget has set aside £200,000 towards feasibility studies to support the possibilities around this circular economy. With many businesses now looking at how data can be used to develop smart manufacturing, we have committed £200,000 to help attract new clean technology manufacturing to Perth. As we emerge from COVID, it is key that we emerge and build a green recovery. We in the SNP have no hesitation in committing COVID reserves to help build this future for our communities and economy, ensuring a fair and just transition to net zero. As part of delivering this, we are committing to providing additional staff capacity to add to and complement the excellent staff resources we already have in place, with a dedicated officer to explore, research and progress new innovative approaches to green growth. I commend this SNP Green Recovery budget to Council. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Waters. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My problem with both the motion and the amendments, apart from the Liberal Democrat amendment, is that none of the budgets are actually sustainable. The Conservative one is certainly more sustainable than the rest, but the SNP and the Independent Labour budgets are totally unsustainable. Talking about completely using the reserve to try and back up their spending plans. If that's done, what's going to happen next year when we come to February? That money can't be spent twice and it's got to be found from somewhere else. I was quite surprised at Councillor Gray saying that we could do a lot better if only we got more money from Westminster. I have to say, Councillor Gray, I often wonder what happens to the money that actually gets to Holyrood. Let's look at the budget for the Constitution, shall we? That's now been raised to £370 million. The budget for the Constitution is set aside for IndyRef 2 and also to fund the wee pretendy embassies that the Scottish Government has set up in different parts of the world. Now, if we took that £370 million budget and split it between the 31 local authorities, that would give us all £12 million, which should be ours and not be squandered on the sort of things that the SNP likes to squander it on. I'm not going to mention Bifab and Methyl, where £55 million was wasted, or even Ferguson Marine, where at least £200 million was wasted. And they still can't even quote for more ferries and can't complete the ones they've got. So really the fault doesn't lie with this council, it lies with the Scottish Government's funding. But let's go back now and look at the budget itself. I can't support any budget that isn't sustainable. And for that reason, I'll not be supporting any of the amendments or the Conservative budget. We can't spend money twice. If we're taking money out of reserves to try and stand still, then it's not sustainable. I know there's an election in May, but that doesn't give us any excuse for especially the SNP for throwing money about like confetti and all the little pet projects. I mean, I was never approached by the administration to ask for what would I like to spend money on. I'm sure every councillor in this whole of Perth and Kinross has got a whole lot of pet projects they would love 20, 30, 50, £100,000 to back. And I've got no objections to any of the money that's been put forward in any of the budgets for projects, but we cannot be using reserves to do that. We have to try and work in a sustainable way so that whoever takes over in after May is able to run an efficient and sustainable council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I would like to endorse the SNP amendment for civic licence holders. Our support recognises they have not been able to make best use of their licences during the pandemic. I'm sure that this support will be welcomed across, or should I say, by many Highland Games and show committees across Highland Perthshire. After listening to the concerns of businesses in Pitlochry, we are delighted to support their request to open the Pitlochry toilets for an additional hour at either end of the day to support touring coaches who come into the town on the way to other parts of Scotland. My ward contains many bridges and parapets. The additional funding within the SNP amendment will provide investments in bridges, such as the Wade Bridge in Aberfeldy, which has long been requested that additional funding is provided for that bridge, and hopefully this funding will provide protection for it for the future. I would also like to welcome the SNP investment in the action partnerships to allow them to identify and deal with inequalities across Highland Perthshire. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. You'll be pleased to hear that I don't intend to refer to the UK or Scottish Government budgets this afternoon, but to consider the impact of the budgets in front of us today. In comparison to some other budgets presented, the Conservative administration budget demonstrates an excellent, well-balanced and responsible budget which looks to the future. This contrasts significantly with the totally irresponsible amendment put forward by the SNP, which would result in a structural deficit for 2023-24 of nearly £11 million, while at the same time having blown off the council's savings. This leaves a funding gap the following year of almost £10 million for the next administration, equivalent to a 10% rise in the council tax. This compares to a gap of just £1.7 million from the far more responsible Conservative administration budget. Deputy Provost, our budget motion contains many excellent initiatives which will help people, communities and businesses all across Perth and Kinross. During the past 2 years of COVID restrictions, many local charities and community groups who had bought 3-year licences from the council for planned events were unable to make use of them. Mostly licences such as public entertainment or market traders licences. While we are not permitted to reimburse these groups for licences already purchased, we propose to fund up to 50% of the renewal of their next 3-year licence. Now that we are opening up again, we hope that this will go some way to supporting local organisations like Highland Games associations as they endeavour to put their events back on after, in many cases, a 2-year absence of significant funding loss. The Council's new visitor ranger service was extremely well received across the rural parts of Perth and Kinross by residents and business visitors alike. I'm pleased to say, Deputy Provost, that we put 2 years funding towards forward last year in our approved budget motion. This means that we have £240,000 in the coming year's budget to re-employ our seasonal visitor rangers, and I understand that we are funding up to 10 visitor rangers this year and that they will commence shortly. The rangers are making a great difference to the way visitors experience their time in Perth and Kinross and enjoy our scenic landscapes. They're doing a great job and I'm pleased to see them back. In conjunction with our visitor management arrangements, we are putting a further £40,000 into the Visitor Management Fund, which will assist our Safer Communities team to put additional facilities in place, particularly in the more remote areas. Members will be aware that the Royal National Mod is coming to Perth this year. With foresight, this council has a recurring contribution to help fund these occasions. The Perth and Angus Provincial Mod is one of the largest provincial mods in Scotland and will celebrate its 100th anniversary in 2023. To assist with this and other Gaelic events across Perth and Kinross, I welcome the additional £5,000 investment. Finally, Deputy Provost, these last 2 years have been an extremely difficult and challenging time for all of us. Sadly, many of our loved ones succumbed to the COVID virus, including our own colleague Henry Anderson. Many deaths came at a time when we were prevented from properly celebrating and commemorating those who passed away. As we now begin to see the worst effects of the virus behind us, we will establish a fitting memorial as a tribute to those who are gone, but not forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. When I came to this meeting today, I thought it was a budget meeting, and then suddenly I thought it was in the wrong place, and it seemed to be an election meeting on behalf of the Scottish National Party. But I would commend our Conservative budget, and I know it will be supported by everyone who has the good of the people of Perth and Kinross at heart, because it covers all the areas from education, business, the economy, roads. I could go on. I don't think we missed anything out. And I see it is purely in the interest of the council taxpayers of this area. In this council, our finances have been squeezed every year, and this year it is no different. We've had lots of money coming from Westminster. Not all of it has arrived where it should have done. This year, we are told that we have a 10% uplift, but thanks to restricted funding, it means that our hands are tied even more. It's a complete loss of local democracy, because when we receive money from Holyrood and it's restricted, we have to spend it where they tell us and not where we know that it is actually needed. It's not strange that all the council leaders in Scotland and COSLA too are against what was proposed, and they were looking for much more flexibility, which they certainly didn't get. Now, I was personally attacked earlier, as was my colleague Councillor James, regarding the Stewart Tower Road, and I would point out that there never was a vote against spending this money on it that Councillor James or I took part in. We have a £1 million programme of roads. The A9 has affected it. The improvements have impacted quite severely on some of our roads programme. But now with the opening of the Lunkerty-Burnham stretch, we can get back on track. But with Councillor Laing's obsession with the Stewart Tower Road, I would suggest that he drives some of the other roads in Strathay so that he has a picture of the true position. You know, there are surveys going on at the moment right across the whole of Perth and Kinross. This will be issued shortly with the contracts, and the contractor will be appointed. And then all the work will be done as quickly as possible, and the report will come back somewhere about April time, and the results will follow shortly after. And that will give us a far better picture of our whole road's position. And that's the time when there will be choices to be made. But it seems that Councillor Laing wants to micromanage our officers' operational duties and dictate to them where they should spend money. Their professional expertise will come up with the priorities, and we should leave them to get on with their job. Well, we the Conservatives are the only party to look at the total picture here. We're not going for any quick fixes for the election purposes. We are not ripping all our reserves out and emptying our bank accounts, which will give us big problems in the future. As I say, this is a well-balanced budget. It covers all aspects of lives of our residents, and I heartily commend it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jarvis. Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking all the officers who have supported the SNP BRG group to bring forward this SNP revenue budget amendment. Deputy Provost, as you and my colleagues in this virtual chamber will have read, the priorities of the SNP revenue budget amendment is to minimise service reduction and maintain the level of services expected by our communities across the whole of Perth and Kinross. We have rejected £1.5 million of savings within the administration revenue budget, and quite rightly so. All of these savings, if implemented, would have had a detrimental impact on jobs and the well-being of our residents in Perth and Kinross. The SNP budget will create jobs. The SNP budget promotes health and well-being from social prescribing, supporting mental health self-groups and building footpaths and walkways. The SNP budget invests in local communities, giving communities a voice a voice to express what matters most to them and what's best for the community they live in. The SNP budget tackles the climate change agenda by bringing forward innovative solutions to help us reach our net zero climate target by 2045. The SNP budget supports the voluntary sector with a 7.5% uplift in funding. The SNP budget supports our allios with extra funding, which will help our citizens with their health and well-being. The SNP budget will deliver a cleaner Perth and Kinross, targeting areas most in need of attention and having a dedicated coordinator. Sorry, just to beg your pardon. Sorry, I've lost my place there. The SNP budget promotes health and well. No, I've done that. SNP coordinator this work with training for other council employees on how to deal with antisocial behaviour. In essence, Deputy Provost, this SNP budget amendment will benefit all the people of Perth and Kinross by putting communities at the heart of our thinking. I had a telephone conversation with Murray a while back, and in that conversation he said that it is his desire that the groups within Perth and Kinross Council would work together on certain subject. Now's his chance to put that advice into practice. The SNP revenue budget amendment is for all of the citizens of Perth and Kinross, and I have no hesitation to commend our amendment to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Massey. Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I just wanted to, I will address some local issues in Ward 2 in a moment, but I just wanted to go back to the very start of the debate this afternoon and draw a contrast between Councillor Sarwar's comments and Councillor McCall's comments. Councillor Sarwar was lauding the SNP budget for providing more welfare support, whereas Councillor McCall was lauding the Conservative budget for our clear support for more help for business and economic growth. That help for business to the tune of £975,000 will obviously help businesses grow, start up, develop, employ people, particularly in rural settings, and will reduce the need for welfare. So while the SNP budget was increasing the need for dependency, the Conservative budget is attempting to reduce it. As I said, there were £975,000 for economic development and business growth in the Conservative budget. That includes a further £150,000 for microgrants, which has been one of the best received council schemes I have seen based on the feedback from small and micro businesses. And it also includes £100,000 worth of additional support to the excellent and widely regarded work, not just within Perth and Kinross, but across Scotland, of GrowBiz. The SNP budget increases the structural deficit next year, while reducing the COVID reserve to next to nothing. That, Deputy Provost, is just saving up problems for next year. One might say not so much stronger for Scotland as stronger for future cuts. And no wonder that Councillor Lang deliberately chose not to speak about which government has provided funding for local authorities. Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, passed on in full the required funding for the national insurance contribution increases. Kate Forbes didn't. Rishi Sunak has passed on money for council tax reductions of £150 to all households at Band D or below. Thank goodness that Kate Forbes forgot to squirrel that money away as well. Turning to the local issues, as was referred to earlier, Ward 2 does contain many communities strung along the A93 and A94 trunk roads. The A93 has an action plan in place, but further action is required, for example in Gilton, And road safety measures, further action is required on road safety measures, and I'm pleased to see these included in the Conservative budget. But we also need an action plan in place for the A94, particularly given the increase in traffic that will follow from the Cross Tay Link Road, and to address traffic calming measures in places such as Balbeggie. And so I'm pleased to see money included in this budget to complete work on the action plan for the A94. I'm also particularly pleased to see the inclusion of £30,000 to address flood protection and prevention measures in the short term in Alyth. We do have a flood management study going on that's due to report back sometime in the first half of next year, I would anticipate. But in the meantime, there are very clear and present risks. In 2020, we had 2 or possibly 3 major flood or near flood events. And I know from speaking to residents, the very real anxiety and concern that these events cause. So I'm pleased that the Conservative group have included this money in the budget today. I'll conclude by saying it sounds like views on the budgets are very entrenched across the chambers today. Normally, I would commend our Conservative budget to fellow elected members, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to go above fellow elected members' heads and commend this Conservative budget to the residents and taxpayers of Perth and Kinross. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I want to briefly address a few areas of our excellent SNP budget proposals in my comments. Firstly, our proposals draw heavily on use of the COVID reserve, precisely because now is the time to use the COVID reserve. Yes, we are still cautious, we are still coming out of the pandemic, we are not out of the woods completely, but now is the time to act, and we are acting. I am astonished that neither the administration nor the Liberal Democrats are choosing to use this reserve at the right time. Our budget proposals allocate £600,000 to a resilience fund. Traditionally, we have made provision for winter snow and ice. This can be dangerous but tends to be disruptive. But climate change is giving us more heavy rain and high winds, with the potential to be far more dangerous than disruptive than traditional winter weather. Climate change is also impacting on health and the spread of plant, animal and human disease. Our proposal here is a first recognition that we need to do more on a broader basis to support the resilience of our community in these times of climate change. We also allocate £114,000 on a recurring basis to the reinforcement of our welfare rights team and make £600,000 available for extra support to the vulnerable in our community. COVID and Brexit have both negatively impacted on our community and the most vulnerable in it. The reduction of universal credit and the forthcoming increase in national insurance contributions add more to the problems faced by those with less resource. A fuel crisis is leading to rising rates of fuel poverty, and events in the East just now could add very considerably to European gas prices, even if these events do not cause other more fundamental problems. Our proposal will do much to mitigate the problems for those in our community with least resource. The need for social security is now. In another area, we are making £150,000 available over 3 years to allow the renewal of civic licences to be done at a very heavily discounted rate. During COVID, many were not able to exploit the licences they had purchased and so incurred nugatory expenditure. As a form of business support, we want to enable the renewal of civic licences at a heavily discounted rate for a period of 3 years. Finally, I turn my attention to public transport. Actually, not quite finally. I fully support the Scottish Government initiative to offer free at the point of use bus travel to all those under 22. But the buses have to be there to be used. And as a step in the improvement of our local public transport, we want to subsidise late night weekend buses from Perth, as we previously did, with an allocation this time of £70,000. But we budget also we we budget also to allocate £60,000 for an in-depth review of our public transport provision. Much work on public transport as part of the climate change agenda is being done nationally and through TACTRAN with the development of new transport strategies. We want Perth and Kinross to be fully engaged with that work and seeking to make a difference with our public transport provision. And finally, I want to commend our uplift to all voluntary organisations of 7.5% in their allocations. These are the people that work hard and have worked hard through COVID to help our communities, and we want to help them to go on with that helping work. I commend the SNP budget to Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parrott. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm delighted to speak in support of the administration budget proposal today. I've now been a councillor for almost 15 years, and with each year that goes by, we as a local authority have had to do more with less. This year is no different. This budget is being considered against the backdrop of the pandemic, and we're putting forward a budget which puts recovery at its heart. Economic recovery to create the right conditions for growth in our economy across Perth and Kinross, and crucially for our younger residents, the opportunity to secure jobs. We've maintained our modern apprentice scheme, which has allowed young people to start careers within our organisation and lead by example to other local businesses. Our budget is also financially affordable. We can't just look at this year in isolation, even though we are setting a one-year budget. Our children will still need taught, our roads looked after, and our economy supported next year and in the years after that. To leave ourselves with the deficit for next year, as the SNP have done, is just plain irresponsible. The impact of COVID is still not completely known, and we do a disservice by not acknowledging that. I'd like to focus on our educational recovery commitments. As is right and proper given the pandemic, we have received substantial support from the Scottish Government as part of the Four Nations approach to supporting our children and young people back on their educational journeys following 2 years of disruption to education right across the UK. In addition to this national resource, we are rejecting proposals amounting to £336,000, accepting pressures of over 1.3 million in this financial year on top of almost 2 million rejected last year. We're also committing £98,000 to provide additional staff to work across our schools to provide support to those who need it the most. We're further investing £136,000 in helping young people access an increasing number of courses and foundation apprenticeships, providing the opportunities that we know our young people need. Comments have been made today regarding teacher numbers. We will still be maintaining primary school teacher numbers as per the papers agreed at Lifelong Learning, and this change reflected in the budget just reflects the falling roles that we're seeing in our primary schools. In the coming financial year, we want to send out a message to our care experienced young people to be a strong one, and we are ensuring money is available to implement the promise. Looking back on the 5 years of our administration, I am personally very proud of our efforts to ensure young people and their families have been given the support they really need. The successful implementation of the REACH project, which delivered the outcomes we wanted, showed what can be achieved if there is a will to deliver services differently. We believe very firmly that, whenever possible, our children and young people should remain within their communities, and that will continue to be our direction of travel. Since 2017, this administration, despite the financial challenges faced, has overseen investment in the education of our children and young people to the sum of almost £90 million in capital spend, a combination of Perth and Kinross Council and Scottish Government capital monies. Through a programme of refurbishments, infrastructure works and new builds, we have managed this through careful management of our revenue budget, and we shouldn't put that at jeopardy. I'd like to put on record my thanks to all the officers across ECS and Property Services who've worked tirelessly throughout the pandemic to keep services on track and to keep projects moving forward. Our proud record continues with work delivering ongoing projects worth over 120 million of capital, from Mesvin and Perth High School to Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, all of which ensures we have a school estate fit for the future. We're investing in our virtual campus, expanding course choices and opportunities for apprenticeships, supporting our most vulnerable children and young people, and doing all we can to promote excellent learning and teaching and excellent relationships right across education and children's services. Deputy Provost, I'm happy to support the administration budget.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank Councillor Shires. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. What would I like to see in a council budget? I'd like to show that we care about vulnerable people. I like to see how important services are maintained and improved. I like to see local groups and organisations get the support they need. And I like to see a serious challenge to climate change. And Deputy Provost, this SNP budget amendment does those things. It uses the COVID reserve as it's needed now. And I will come to examples within my speech where that money is needed now for groups within our communities for them to recover for COVID today and not be left in limbo at some date in the future where others may choose to support them. Financial inclusion within our budget is very important. Significant hardships for many with rising costs, national insurance increases, who would have thought that, and energy costs all rising. More and more families are struggling to make ends meet, and that includes families in well-paid work. The funding that we have put in here will assist and people who are having problems paying rent, paying their bills, in exactly the same way that this council already provides to its own tenants through the Tenancy Sustainment Fund. Additional staffing resource at Welfare Rights will be needed, and recurring funding from the SNP budget would allow them to help implement this financial inclusion package, as well as all the work that they currently do to support our communities with Scottish Government money. Additional resources for school clothing grants is essential as prices rise and demands on families increase. Removal of the school crossing controllers is now going to be stopped, and I'm glad to see that. It took reports of speeding and near accidents to change this administration's mind, in my view. We're going to support primary swimming, as if others are, but we're not only going to do that, we're going to go further and ensure that the extra funding is there for those who missed out during COVID. Living in a rural ward with lochs and rivers around us, it is so essential for our children to learn to swim. I don't want to go back to the years of the 70s and 80s when I was a kid to hear about people drowning during the summer holidays. The reduction in teacher numbers. You know, the convener for education has just spoken on this matter, and I don't agree with her. I think that we should maximise the number of teachers we have in the primary sector, not cut it as low as we can. Education investment at the early years is the most valuable time we can do it and has the most constructive use of that money and the better outcome for those children. As a rural ward, investment in non-trunk road transport infrastructure, road safety and a reduction in vehicle emissions is so important. And these measures will help put in measures that will reduce speed. And these are things that I know my fellow ward councillors get constant emails about, as I do. Strategic review of public transport is so essential going forward for climate change. We need to move away from our reliance on private cars for everything we do. Rurally, there will always be times where you have to use a private car. That's going to be unavoidable. And the inclusion of late night bus services for the rural towns within our budget will also help the nighttime economy. It's near impossible to visit Perth for a night out, to go to Horsecross or to go to any other events and get home to Blairgowrie on a bus. Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership and Live Active Leisure have worked together in the past for social prescribing, and we want to support this further. Social prescribing is probably one of the most beneficial, cost-effective use of money within healthcare because it prevents ill health. And that prevention of ill health and diabetes and mental health problems is ultimately one of the best ways that we as a council can spend money to support the health of our population. Mental health self-groups have popped up all around Perth and Kinross during COVID, and supporting people as they struggled with isolation, they struggled with the virus, and they struggled with the effects that virus had on the families. You know, groups like Man Talk in Blairgowrie will be able to apply to our fund to help rock solid their organisation as they go forward and deliver the activities that they wish to do at a better time. One of the groups that did pop up through Proactive Communities in Blairgowrie was the Barry Food Store, who have just moved into new premises in the High Street. I have been astounded by the work that they have done during COVID, providing food at an affordable cost to people. And I can't imagine the users are going to go down as we move forward. And the support to them, I think, is essential, because I think they're going to become an essential part of our systems. Local action partnerships have been starved of funds. I've sat in meetings where local groups ask... You've
almost time up, about 15 seconds left.
I thought I was going to get a minute.
Seconds. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't want to stop you early. Just keep going. Give you a minute. Finish what you're saying.
Local action partnerships. I've started local action partnership groups where the members of the group have asked, "Where's our money?" And all the councillors sit there with their heads down in silence as they never fund the local action partnerships. I'm glad to see Blair Toilets going to be kept open, and I'm glad to see that we're going to provide free parking for electric vehicles. The other climate issues that are in our budget have been mentioned before.
Councillor McEwen, I think you're going a wee bit too far now. You've gone on more. I think just stop at that point, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. You'll be pleased to know that I spent lunchtime searching the corridors of 2 High Street looking for Boris Johnson, because after the bizarre rant from Councillor Drysdale this morning, I was absolutely convinced he was in the building and running this council, but I can report he's nowhere to be found. Deputy Provost, I would normally never mention the Labour and Independent budget proposals because they are in the very enviable position of being able to promise absolutely everything they want, safe in the knowledge they will never be called on to deliver it. However, this time is different. Their budget proposal reminded me of the one and only time I've watched QVC, a shocking list of giveaways, pandering to their core vote like their friends in the SNP, absolutely draining the COVID reserve fund when we have no idea if COVID has been defeated. This is typical socialist nonsense, and if we agree to this, the next administration will arrive to this office and find a note in a drawer that says the money is all spent. So turning to the SNP, can I first of all congratulate them for turning up today? Had the Conservatives been running Holyrood and shafted local councils to the tune of 251 million, I would have taken a sickie and not appeared, but fair play to them for turning up to try and defend what their government has done. So despite those cuts, and thanks to the good financial management of our administration, we're able to present a balanced and common sense budget that not only rejects most of the frontline cuts proposed by officers, but actually manages to build on the good work we've been doing over the last few years. We've made great progress in our roads over the last 4 years. The huge investment that this administration has made since we came to power has shown real dividends. We've moved significantly up the league table from position 20 to position 14, and it's my ambition that we go even further. Our road network runs to 2,483 kilometres, and this administration has resurfaced 6% of that, as well as surface dressing a further 22%, as more than a quarter of our network has had attention, and we've done that by spending sums of money never before seen in this authority. We've fixed an incredible 55,522 potholes. Given today's weather, there will be more to do. Some people may complain about the shape of those repairs, but our residents just want them fixed. As well as spending money, we do know that the other way to keep our roads in good condition is to prevent water getting onto the road surfaces. And that brings me to another investment we're making today, and that's around gullies and drains. We know that only a small number of our gullies are blocked at any one time, but it's an issue that we all get letters and calls about, which means that this commitment to clear more gullies will be very welcome to our constituents. And just less than 5 years ago, we set our priorities for the administration, and road safety was one of those priorities. This additional investment of 300,000 demonstrates that. Road safety is really important to our communities, and I know the large number of vehicle activated signs that we have commissioned have been well received, and indeed we get regular requests for more of them. And this recent bad weather, Deputy Provost, has shown us that our bridges and structures need investment. And nobody really cares about bridges until they fail. And we've had at least 3 major bridge failures in recent years. The additional 2 million will allow the council's engineers to expand the work they already do. And let's not forget that bridges carry roads. So this is an investment in our roads as well as our bridges. And one of the things I'm particularly proud of is the way we work with our communities. Perth won the Champions of Champions in the recent Britain Bloom Awards. And in my role as convener of E&I, I'm progressing the plans to expand this by developing a Friends of Cemeteries group. There are already more than 10 locations signed up, and this funding we're announcing today will allow that to happen. So to conclude, Deputy Provost, the Scottish Government have a 10.6% rise in cash that they've received from the UK Government. They continue to not only cut our grant, but to further ring fence what they do give us. Despite all of this, we've managed to put forward a balanced, sensible and sustainable budget based on what our communities really want. So Deputy Provost, before I finish, I just want to say to everyone, this has been another very difficult budget to balance, and no matter your political persuasion, these decisions are difficult to stomach, but we are elected to make them. And some of our colleagues who are not in administration, and frankly have no chance of ever being in administration, can make all sorts of promises safe in the knowledge of never being challenged to deliver on them, and what a happy place that must be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I think before I talk about our budget amendment, I would like to remind fellow councillors who seem intent on denouncing the SNP Scottish Government that less than a year ago this SNP Government was returned with an increased majority and a mandate to deliver their manifesto nationally. Criticising them for doing exactly what they were elected to do suggests a lack of awareness of the political reality in Scotland. And it's disappointing that so many people rely on an SNP bad narrative to try and support their own budget proposals. However, to our budget amendment. I think everyone will acknowledge that we have lived through a very challenging time over the past couple of years due to the COVID pandemic, and that hasn't ended yet. Layered on top of that are the consequences of Brexit, which I have no doubt is driving many of the supply shortages and price increases being faced by all of us. Prior to the onset of the pandemic, our communities were already feeling the impact of the climate emergency and the brutal negative impact of the Westminster Tory austerity programme that was aided and abetted by their Lib Dem coalition partners. In particular, universal credit has nothing positive to commend it. Instead, it increases inequalities in our most vulnerable residents. The increase in demand for services from our welfare rights team is a testament to increasing pressures being faced by many in our electorate, pressures that are unlikely to ease anytime soon. Our budget provides recurring funding to increase the welfare rights team by 3 staff members, as well as providing £600,000 of funding through financial inclusion proposals. Having seen firsthand how both the Community Investment Fund and Perth City Local Action Partnership integrate with local communities, it is my firm belief that local action partnerships achieve greater participation by far and ownership from local communities. Local communities who are best placed, in my view, to both identify what their needs are, but crucially, to also be part of the solution. To that end, I am delighted that we've included investment of £600,000 that will redress the disinvestment over the past few years in local action partnerships. As a trustee of Lethen for All, I have seen firsthand how a local community can be energised by a common goal. When my family moved to Perth City South, Moncrieff Community Centre was a well-used and integral part of our local social landscape. Prior to COVID, indeed, there were active discussions in progress with a local user group with a view to possible community asset transfer in due course. This is, I believe, the way forward for this neglected local facility. I am very pleased, therefore, that our SNP budget has set aside £30,000 for a comprehensive feasibility study to explore how we can repurpose and better utilise Moncrieff Community Centre so that it is once again a valuable resource to local residents, clubs and community groups. I mentioned the climate emergency earlier, and I am pleased that our budget has identified funds to address the many issues that currently exist, particularly the increased incidence of flooding in my own ward in Perth City South, but also throughout Perthshire and Kinrossshire. Tackling the climate emergency is a priority for our SNP group, and I am pleased to support our proposals that will take forward sustainable and lasting initiatives to tackle the climate emergency and its impacts on all of us. The changing climate and more extreme weather conditions, especially in winter, causes considerable difficulty for many of our residents who are not on bus routes and do not benefit from routine snow and ice clearing. So I'm pleased that our budget includes £50,000 to provide additional grit bins throughout Perth and Kinross, and that will enable people locally to at least make sure their streets and pavements and driveways are safe and passable. Finally, when I was first elected almost 5 years ago, one of the first things that came across my desk was long-standing concerns regarding road safety around our schools. Despite scepticism from longer-serving councillors in my ward, I was determined to find a strategic solution that met the concerns of parents, pupils, residents and school staff and the wider community. I'm really pleased that my hard work has paid off and the school exclusion zone for Viewlands Primary School and Perth Academy will launch soon. However, the success of this SEZ requires the installation of puffin crossings and other road safety measures that will also create an environment that will facilitate safer active travel. So I am pleased that the SNP budget therefore provides funding to accelerate the build and installation of these road safety measures, not just in my ward.
Councillor McCall, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. Thank you. So I'm pleased that the SNP budget therefore provides funding to accelerate the build and installation of these road safety measures, not just in my ward, but where they're needed elsewhere throughout Perth and Kinross. Our SNP budget focuses on reducing inequalities, empowering local communities and tackling the climate emergency. And I am pleased to commend this budget to the Council. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Now it's more than 10 minutes since anyone asked to speak, so I'm planning to make Councillor Donaldson the last speaker, so over to Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I was getting alarmed there that you'd missed me out. Surely you would.
So before you start, I just noticed that Councillor McDade has now put his asking to speak now. Councillor McDade, I did wait 10 minutes to see if you're going to do it, but you will be the last speaker then. I will be leaving because I think that's enough warning to let people sort out the afternoon. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I take it that's not coming out my 5 minutes. I shall be, colleagues, voting for the only sensible, prudent and sustainable suggestion on the table today, which is, of course, the Liberal Democrat amendment. I am both disappointed and alarmed with what I'm seeing and hearing today, and I would draw everyone's attention to the bottom line of the tables on page 1 and page 3 of the excellent comparison document that colleagues produced for us today. And that shows very starkly the high risk and reckless proposals by other groups. By rejecting the well thought out budget pressures and by raiding the COVID reserves, they're on the road to ruin. We have a massive structural deficit. The funding we get gives us no baselining. We are getting ring-fenced funds which are only one-off, very poor and not particularly sticky financial sticking plasters. And to make matters worse, there are suggestions of putting funds into areas within the council who have limited capacity. And that capacity is limited by the short-term thinking of the past and the one-year budgets, which don't allow for us to offer the council officers, the well-qualified officers that we need. We can't offer them a career, we can offer them a one-year contract. And surprisingly, we find difficulty in both filling these jobs and getting the work done. I was quite surprised to hear the suggestion made by some that there is no underfunding. According to COSLA, they calculate that there's a £371 million underfunding just for us to stay still this year, not this council, all councils, and that doesn't allow for any pay inflation or increased demand or indeed extra energy costs. Until such time as local authorities are correctly funded in order that they can undertake all their duties, we are going to have this sort of a problem. Councillor Robertson highlighted how there's money around within the Scottish budget, but it gets wasted. And if one was a disinterested observer, one would find it hard to believe, observing today's discussions, that we live in the 5th richest country in the world. There is money there. It's simply that central government, and Holyrood is as bad as Westminster, are waging a war against local democracy and making sure that as local representatives, our hands are tied when we want to deliver for local people. There's a list of several pages of wasted money in Westminster, but today it was announced that the Public Accounts Committee reckons that there's 21 billion of COVID loans that have been fraudulently given out that may never be recovered. That is simply one example of cash that would be much better spent by local authorities, not just in Perth and Kinross, but throughout Scotland, rather than wasted. We've had to write off, I understand, nearly £9 billion of PPE bought out of a £12 billion bill, again due to incompetence. So there's no incompetence in Perth and Kinross. We are ready and willing to deliver for the people who elect us, but our hands are tied with interference of central government. And let's hope by next year, if we're all still here, we can do something about that. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. You know, in the US, they sometimes come out with the phrase, all politics is local. Despite the comments of Councillor Robertson and Jarvis, it really is important at these budget meetings that local members do put forward local initiatives that are to the benefit of their own local communities. Nothing wrong with that. And I especially welcome in Crieff the 35,000 that will ensure the refurbishment of the Murray Fountain and the upgrade of James Square. Tied in with that is the 23,000 to reopen the public toilets in James Square over the winter months. And in particular, the 95,000 to add to the funds available from Sustrans should ensure that we move ahead with the Crieff to Comrie core path. The planning application is in, and we're going to possibly, hopefully do so after 14 years of waiting. Staying local, at the other end of the River Erne in Bridge of Erne, I really wished Henry Anderson could be here to say this. And by the way, I do appreciate the comments of Councillor John Duff earlier on. But what we are putting forward is for 50,000 in community facilities at Oudenarde in Bridge of Erne, and I think in particular for play facilities which are lacking there. As I said, in fact, and we've seen it recently, not all politics is local. We're seeing that in rising energy and commodity prices, heightened tensions in Eastern Europe, the threats to the independence of Ukraine. And we're seeing it quite clearly in the rise in the cost of living. The retail price index is now 7.8%, going higher, could even be 10%, because that's before the rise in energy prices. And what does the UK government do in all of this? They apply now in April a 1.25% increase in national insurance contributions for both employees and employers. It's a double whammy. And I have to say, it's like pouring oil onto a raging fire. One of the key elements, one of the key elements of our budget proposals has been to mitigate the impact of soaring inflation. That's why we are arguing for a 2.7% increase in council tax, well within the Bank of England's usual inflation target of 2% plus minus 1%, but also at the same time defending frontline services. It's also why we are using the COVID reserve, and remember it's the COVID reserve, to a significant degree to deal with the aftermath of the pandemic and the growing crisis with the cost of living. We've aimed to do that in terms of our proposals on financial inclusion. On welfare rights capacity, where the only other group that is doing anything is the Liberal Democrats, although I think we're about something like 50,000 more, and that is required. It really is necessary. But in two particular areas, investing in local communities, 600,000 for the local action partnerships. And it really is no good having local action partnerships with local action plans, and they have no money. They are starved of cash and the ability to actually do anything specific and clear for local communities. It's an absurdity.
Councillor
But I think in particular,
1 minute.
It's the 488,000 that we are putting into voluntary organisations. I think that's money that leverages voluntary effort, creates benefit for our communities, multifold, and it's bodies like most of us are involved with, but bodies also like, say, PCAFs or CAF or ASAC or Women's Aid, and a whole variety of others, and that is real benefit to the community. But let me just conclude with one point. This is not just on our part a budget to defend local communities, although it is that coming out of COVID. It's not just to encourage voluntary and community effort, it is that. But it's also a budget proposal to stimulate innovation and to develop green growth. And I think what Councillor Waters said, and it's a cost of 1.1 million, is really so important. We are talking about feasibility studies, about support grants into climate change projects.
Councillor Donaldson, you're way over your time.
One of the highlights of what we're
Councillor Donaldson.
And also with funding for a dead.
Councillor Donaldson.
Councillor Donaldson, I've been trying to tell you for over a minute that you had a minute to go, so you're well over your 5 minutes now. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy Provost, for the we all know that we are facing the greatest cost of living crisis in 30 years.
McDade, we don't hear you very well. Can you speak a bit louder, or your microphone not quite working?
Sorry, I'll start again. Is that better?
That's better. That's much better, thank you.
Sorry, apologies about that, Deputy Provost. I'll just start again. Thank you, Deputy Provost. We all know that we are facing the greatest cost of living crisis in 30 years, with inflation hitting its highest level in my lifetime. Families and pensioners in our communities, and not just those in the poorest households, but also those in the middle classes, are now facing very tough choices as energy bills double. The independent Labour councillors do not think that we should abandon these families in their hour of need, which is why we've put forward a £7.5 million fund tax rebate, which equates to about £100 for every household in Perth and Kinross, to help families with those bills and with that challenge of balancing budgets at this very difficult time. We've also included significant targeted measures to help families struggling with some of such things like school uniforms, and to help lower their energy bills through insulation, which also helps the environment. By freezing council tax, which is one of the most regressive forms of taxation, which we mention every year, and again I call on the Scottish Government to reform the council tax to something more progressive, we are supporting the poorest families who will be hardest hit. Councillor Liz Barrett and Councillor Angus Forbes both incorrectly stated we were wiping out the COVID reserve. We have simply redirected it to our Future Services Wealth Fund, which I would think all councillors would support, particularly the Liberal Democrats, since they have raised concerns throughout today's meeting about how we will fund services in the future. Well, ask no more, we have an answer, and you can vote for our budget as a result. Our Future Services Wealth Fund does just that, and it is about maximising our resources to the benefits of our residents. It also provides a huge amount of potential investment into local businesses, which I know Councillor McCall was concerned that we hadn't supported, but actually we have, and I suggest people read the fine print. We are doing all of this despite not hiking taxes on our hard-hit residents, which the Conservatives and Liberal Democrat groups seem to be doing, despite the fact that they're also cutting teacher numbers. And I can't quite understand how that can be necessary when you're hiking taxes in the way that they are, apart from perhaps a lack of imagination and innovation in their budgets. The tone of many of the Conservative and Liberal Democrat councillors seems to have be forgetting that they are also using reserves in their budgets. There is £7 odd million of reserves being used in all of our budgets in the base that we approved last year. So I think we all want to be a bit more careful perhaps before we start hammering the use of reserves, since we have used them in the last couple of years to help prop us up. And I think the question really is, if not to use some of these now, when? Because if now is not the hardest time to come, I dread to think what will be. We have simply chosen to use some of the council's £64 million that is in reserves to help our residents and businesses, and we are simply returning taxpayers' money to help them out when they are hardest pressed and when they have literally pennies in some cases in their bank accounts to survive, as I know many of my constituents do. It is fascinating that despite, as I say, the high tax rate, that our residents are basically getting nothing new from the Conservative administration budget. They have cancelled some of their own policies in their budget to then re-announce them somewhere else in their budget, as I think Councillor Barrett, Liz Barrett mentioned earlier. She's absolutely correct in that. And I'm delighted that they've decided to re-announce the Visitor Ranger funding that I secured last year in this year's budget, and I'm sure that will be attributed, as it was last year by the council leader, to myself and secured. And I think it is fascinating to watch, again, some of our Conservative colleagues who campaigned on a 0% rise and a 1% rise, 0% in year one and a 1% in year two, and delivered a 3% and a 4%, are now bashing the idea that we should keep a regressive form of taxation down in the form of council tax.
Mr. McDade, 1 minute to go.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost.
Thank you.
It is an incredibly regressive form of taxation. It will hit the poorest hardest, and in this year of all years, we should be doing everything we can to prevent that from happening. Our budget is one that not only supports our residents, it supports our businesses and it supports our communities. And I could talk an awful lot more about the wonderful measures that are in there towards green transport and a much more environmentally sustainable future. But there is a fundamental underlying core through our reserve, through our reserves anyway use, through our budget, which is about our families and our residents in Perth and Kinross and the help that we are looking to offer them. And this is a very real, competent budget, and I would urge members to look at it in more detail and consider how there might be some good ideas there they might want to use in the future. It's not always worth bashing because you might have to vote for it in the future when it's represented. Thank you very much, Deputy Provost.
You put a C in the box. You have already spoken, so can I ask what the C is about? Or is it a mistake? Councillor Simpson? No, it's maybe just.
I'm sorry, Deputy President. I've been having some issues with my my chat function. I didn't get a tick, so I sent another C previously.
Oh, right.
Phone, so.
Oh, well, you do have a tick. You've got a tick when you did speak, so that's fine. You have spoken, so that's fine. Thank you very much.
As long as you've got
Thank
a tick,
you
Deputy Provost. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. You've got a tick. Now that my calculations that 32 councillors have spoken in this debate. So that is going to be the end of the debate. And before we ask the movers of the amendments and the motion to sum up, I'm proposing that we have a 10-minute comfort break. So it's now 6 minutes past 3. So we'll be back just about 3:15 to start. So please do not leave the meeting. Just put your cameras off, but do not leave the meeting.
Sorry, Vice Provost, Deputy Provost, I'm concerned that Councillor McDade was muted while speaking. Councillor Donaldson was allowed to go over significantly his time, but it seems that Councillor McDade was muted on the very second of his 5 minutes.
No, sorry, Councillor McDade finished. He said he ended.
I could see his camera still moving. Maybe it's a glitch. Apologies.
But no, sorry,
Okay,
he was
thank
allowed
you.
to speak to the end. He actually stopped.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I've tried to be fair with absolutely everyone.
Councillor Bailey, I was under the impression that Councillor McDade had finished his presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, he had.
I obviously don't know if it was muted.
Right. I don't need that right now. Right. Muted. Right.
Bumped into Angus.
I know she said something personal.
Bumped into Angus.
I'll get this unmuted. Right.
Can councillors please leave their mics all on mute, please, at the moment, until we get round to the voting time, then they take them off, because there's a bit of interference when we have too many people unmuted. Thank you. Yeah, I muted it now. Yeah. Okay, councillors, I think Councillor McDade's connection is now being fixed, so as far as I know, no one else has got any issues. So we will now move to the summing up. So can I ask Councillor Bailey, please, to sum up? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Deputy Provost.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Rather than blaming others today, we did our homework. We pushed for a normal 3-year budget cycle, but we were voted down at the end of last year. Yes, our amendment leaves the council with lower reserves, but what's a COVID reserve there for if it isn't to fund COVID recovery? And is it really the job of this council to use taxation to raise funds in order to bank them? Councillor Lyle spoke about his administration's achievements, but he didn't mention the massive tax hike that underlies them. Residents of Perth and Kinross will see council tax rise by just shy of 11% in 4 years once compounding is included. If Labour and independent budgets had been passed in each of those 4 years, including this year, that rise would have been only just over 5%. As one of his own Tory group said earlier, council tax is a tax that people work hard to pay. I agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly, and that's why I don't like increasing it. Not only that, it is regressive, so it hits the poorest and sometimes the hardest working the hardest. I do commend the Tories' ambition, though. Sadly, though, their ambition has been proven to consistently exceed the capacity of this council to deliver. For 2 years running now, the roads money hasn't been spent in year, and yet another £4 million is being put that way anyway today. If the Tories really want to get the roads fixed in Perth and Kinross, they need to invest in the people and plan to deliver on those big promises and stop this practice of taking the headlines in February and then quietly carrying the money over come next winter when it remains unspent. The administration talks a good talk about education recovery, but let's dig into that a little. They're cutting 6 primary teachers and saving £344,000. That makes their £98,000 one-off for education recovery look like gesture politics. They're taking £344,000 recurring out of education by removing 6 primary teachers, then headlining their proposals today with £98,000 they're putting back in for 1 year only. If they really cared about COVID recovery in education, they'd leave the 6 teachers in post rather than lose them and put a couple of people back in on 1-year contracts. The Liberal Democrats also talk a good talk about welfare officers' fairness and tackling inequalities, subjects that are close to my heart too. Yet they're taking from the poorest with the regressive council tax to fund it. The idea you can somehow tackle inequalities by increasing the tax burden on the poor by relatively more than you are on the rich is way beyond my understanding. I'll finish by leaving you with this thought. Some people have suggested to me that the balloon behind me here trivialises today's very solemn proceedings. However, that balloon was inflated at no cost to the taxpayer, unlike this Tory budget. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Provost Depute. Well, I and my Scottish Liberal Democrat colleagues are living in the real world. The Lib Dem budget is credible, sustainable, and is allied to support the advice of officers, and it minimises the effect on the structural deficit going forward and protects reserves as much as is credibly possible. Of course, it's election year, but if the Labour Independent and SNP groups want to dig a financial hole for the next council term, then it won't be in the Scottish Liberal Democrats' name. Spend, spend, spend. The COVID reserve, quite right, it's there to help support work connected with COVID, but we're going to have several years of that yet, and to virtually spend all of it or tuck it away in another pocket, as has been suggested, is not the way forward. We need to retain that fund so that we can call upon it, and there will be calls upon it that we don't even know about yet, and ones that we will, concerning issues like health and welfare that will come up in year. I'm sure that there should be a healthy balance of reserves kept. We've always had advice on that in the past and still have it today. There are on occasions when Tom Gray and I agree about planning issues by independent thought processes. However, we differ greatly on devolution powers, and that is available from additional taxation. If the SNP government had applied the extra powers that they've got and that flexibility that's been given to them by Westminster, then there might have been a lot fewer problems today than we've identified. And I would counsel Councillor Gray not to support Transport Scotland when it comes to the Broxton roundabout. We're dismayed by the Tory rejection of cost pressures and the reliance on a raid on COVID reserves, as well as the other groups, and we feel that that is disappointing in the least. whilst the Tory action on reserves is disappointing, the mega raid on COVID reserves by other groups is breathtaking in its extent. I'm very happy to support the balanced, responsible and sustainable and achievable budget of the Scottish Liberal Democrat, and I commend it to the Council. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm astonished that as we come out of COVID, the COVID reserve, which is meant to help people and organisations come out of the terrible pressures we've had over the last 2 years, where society has been held back, that we are putting it away for some unknown time to deliver what, I don't know. I'm really disappointed. It's again typical of this administration, the dither and delay, where today we're showing some ambition in action with the SNP amendment. I'd like to go through some of the parts that members would think that we shouldn't be supporting. We shouldn't be putting investment in the green economy and trying to bring green business to Perth and Kinross. We shouldn't support our allios as they come out and try and move forward. We shouldn't be supporting welfare rights, or we shouldn't be supporting funding for financial inclusion to be delivered by welfare rights. We shouldn't be supporting putting recurring funding in to bring officers to drive things forward that we've proposed, tying it together in a joined up way. It's just, again, we're looking not forward, not going forward positively. We make changes now, and some of these changes are spent to save, and to save not just for the council moving forward, but for the residents of Perth and Kinross. That's what we're trying to do. That's what this money is for, the COVID reserve. We're not throwing it around like confetti. It would be interesting to see other elected members who think we're doing this to pick out the things that we put in our budget and say, no, we wouldn't do that. Because I think, and it's maybe a timing issue, and I take on board what Liz Barrett said, and I agree with a lot of what she said. I think they would agree with a lot what's in their budget, and we would look at their, their budget as well. And there's some good things in there. There's some good things in everybody's budget. It's just in timing. We believe we should be doing it now. It's important for us as we're coming out of this. The UK government and probably Scottish government going to follow it. They're almost signalling the end of restrictions for COVID. And I think that if we come with another variant, we were to lock down again, both governments will come in to support us. Now is the time to spend this money. I feel the Tory budget, where I can't believe you can reject an expenditure pressure for business, which is recurring moving forward, and swap it over in as though you're making a new announcement. It's old money, basically. And this is what the Tory government does at UK level. It's rebadging money that was committed last year for visitor management and putting it in as though it's a new spend. You're taking recurring money for business and you're putting it into one-off money this year. I commend this budget because it's, as I say, it's ambition in action. And I'll finish off with just giving a little lesson to Councillor Jarvis. If something's in a budget and you vote against it, you're voting against it. It's been in the budget for 5 or 6 years, the Stuart Tower Road. If you wanted to support that, you'd have to vote for our budget or talked with your colleagues to have it adopted by your motion. You haven't done it, so in fact you have voted against this for 4 or 5 years, as is Councillor James. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lang. And now call upon Councillor Lyle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Firstly, I'd like to thank all those who've been involved in preparing the various budgets today, and again to thank the officers for their assistance. I would just firstly like to comment that I'm proud of the budget that we have put forward as an administration, and I don't intend to whinge about anyone else's budget motion or amendment that they put forward, because I'm quite sure that they're reflecting their sincerely held beliefs. Before moving on, I'd like to make 2 additions to our motion. Firstly, I'd like to add the welfare rights capacity, which is 76,000, and secondly, community asset transfer enablement fund, which is 150,000, and these will be funded coming from the COVID reserve this year. These 2 additions come from the Liberal Democrat group, and I'm thankful for their suggestion to encompass them in our motion, and I'm happy to do so. Deputy Provost, the budget we have brought forward today, in my view, is a balanced budget between the acute needs of our constituents today, but it also recognises the need to maintain a substantial COVID reserve to support our recovery. This is not just to spend today, This is so that going forward we can target the funding to get the maximum benefit for the people of Perth and Kinross. I'm sure that others have different priorities and different, as we've heard today, but I think that on balance, our administration budget is the best to preserve that going forward. This budget has also, I would have to say, been achieved with a modest 2.5% council tax rise, and I'm happy to commend this administration's budget to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lyle. Now we come to the vote, so I will ask Danny to be in charge of the voting. Danny.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Yes, good afternoon, members. So in line with section 21 of the Council Standing Orders, we'll now progress to a roll call vote. There will be 3 roll call votes take place. The first of which will be a vote between the second amendment, which is the amendment proposed by Councillor Wilson and seconded by Councillor Peter Barrett, and the third amendment, which is the amendment proposed by Councillor Bailey and seconded by Councillor Brock. So when I call your name, you can let me know whether you'll be voting for the second amendment or the third amendment, and then that will the winner of that roll call vote will progress to the next roll call vote. So, Councillor Ahern.
Abstain.
Councillor Bailey.
Third amendment.
Deputy Provost.
Abstain.
Councillor Barnacle.
Abstain.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Second amendment.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Second amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Abstain.
Councillor Brock.
Third amendment.
Councillor Audrey Coates. Councillor Coates.
Okay.
Can we check if there's any connection issues with Councillor Coates?
Yeah. Maybe we'll come back to that. Councillor Harry Coates. Yeah, we'll move on. We'll come back around to that. Councillor Donaldson.
Abstain.
Councillor Drysdale.
Abstain.
Councillor Duff. Councillor Duff.
Abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Sorry. Councillor Forbes.
Abstain.
Councillor Gray.
Abstain.
Councillor Illingworth.
Abstain.
Councillor James.
Abstain.
Councillor Jarvis.
Abstain.
Councillor Lang.
Abstain.
Councillor Lyle.
Abstain.
Councillor Massey.
Abstain.
Councillor McCall.
Abstain.
Councillor McCall.
Abstain.
Councillor McDade.
Third amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Abstain.
Provost.
Abstain.
Councillor Parrott.
Abstain.
Councillor Pulver.
Abstain.
Councillor Purvis.
Abstain.
Okay, they've still got their.
Councillor Rebeck.
Abstain.
Councillor Reid.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Second amendment.
Councillor Sarwat.
Abstain.
Councillor Shires.
Abstain.
Councillor Simpson.
Second amendment.
Councillor Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Stewart.
No vote.
Councillor Waters.
Abstain.
Councillor Williamson.
Abstain.
Councillor Wilson.
Second amendment.
Yep. I'm just going to go back round to a point from earlier. Sorry, Councillor Audrey Coates. Are you right to vote?
Excuse me, Danny and Deputy Provost. I note there's a point of order in from Councillor Barrett, but before responding to that, I wonder if I could ask for a 5-minute recess. I've had some distressing news and I would like to deal with it before we proceed.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Lyle. Yes.
Okay,
5
thank
minutes.
you.
Thank you.
5 minutes. Deputy Provost, I'd like to reconvene the meeting. I'm aware the 5 minutes is up, and I'd like to thank members for their indulgence in our 5-minute recess. So I'm happy now to proceed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lyle.
Councillor Barrett has a point of order.
Councillor Barrett has a point of order. Well,
thanks, convener. I wanted to ask whether drinking alcohol was permitted at a council meeting. There was footage of Councillor Audrey Coates waving either a wine or spirits glass, and I'm not entirely sure whether it's connection or consumption problems that she's suffering from.
I will pass over to Lisa, who will make some reference to this. Thank you, Lisa.
Councillor Barrett, we've no specific reference to that in the standing orders. Our virtual protocol does obviously advise councillors and officers not to eat or drink on camera. Clearly there's been a degree of flexibility exercised today as we're sitting with cups, given the length of time that has been going on. At this particular point in time, we can't confirm whether or not there is it was alcohol that was being consumed, but the point is noted and this will be looked into after this meeting.
Thank you.
We will now move to the vote.
Do you want to announce the vote?
We go back to Councillor Coates because we were just sorry, we're moving on. Councillor Danny.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deputy Provost, and thank you very much, members. So, as we concluded the first vote, there were 5 votes in favour of the Second Amendment, 3 in favour of the Third Amendment, and we had a total of 38 abstentions. So, therefore, the Second Amendment will progress to our second vote, which will be the amendment proposed by Councillor Lang and seconded by Councillor Drysdale, which was known as Amendment 1, or First Amendment, sorry. And as I've just stated, that will be against the Second Amendment, which was, to remind you, proposed by Councillor Wilson and seconded by Councillor Peter Barrett. I'd also like to remind members, which I failed to do before the first vote, that you may abstain. Councillor Hearn.
Abstain.
Councillor Bailey.
First Amendment.
Deputy Provost.
Abstain.
Councillor Barnacle.
Abstain.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Second Amendment.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Second Amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Abstain.
Councillor Brock.
First Amendment.
Councillor Audrey Coates. Move on.
Danny, Councillor Coates, Councillors Coates are no longer in the meeting.
Thank you very much for the clarification, Councillor Lyle. And move on to Councillor Donaldson.
First Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
First Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Abstain.
Councillor Forbes.
Abstain.
Councillor Gray.
First Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Abstain.
Councillor James.
Abstain.
Councillor Jarvis.
Abstain.
Councillor Lang.
First Amendment.
Councillor Lyle.
Abstain.
Councillor Massey.
First Amendment.
Councillor McCall.
Abstain.
Councillor McCall.
First Amendment.
Councillor McDade.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
First Amendment.
Provost.
Abstain.
Tell them all. Just press the tell them all. Councillor Parrott.
First Amendment.
Councillor Polbert.
First Amendment.
Councillor Purvis.
Abstain.
Councillor Rayback.
First Amendment.
Not working. The thing's not working.
Scott.
Apologies, member. We've lost connection on our video. We will be with you as soon as we can.
Right, can you just quick
Yeah.
check?
I can hear you fine.
Just for information, Deputy Provost, we can still see you moving. I'm not hearing any voices, but just you indicated your camera is not functioning properly, but we can still see you.
I think we're back on. Thank you. Over to Danny.
Yes, thanks for your patience there, members. I'll continue. So, Councillor Reid.
Abstain.
Councillor Robertson.
Second Amendment.
Councillor Sarwat.
First Amendment.
Councillor Shires. Councillor Simpson.
Second Amendment.
Councillor Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Stewart.
No vote.
Councillor Waters.
First Amendment.
Councillor Williamson.
First Amendment.
And Councillor Wilson.
Second Amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir, members. So that was 15 votes in favour of the First Amendment, 5 in favour of the Second Amendment, and we had 18 abstentions. So Amendment 1 will now become the substantive amendment. And in the third vote, be the motion as proposed by Councillor Lyle and seconded by Councillor Smith, and that will be up against what will now be known as the amendment, which was proposed by Councillor Lang and seconded by Councillor Drysdale. So members, if you can let me know when I call your name, if you'll be voting for the motion, amendment, or if you'll be abstaining. Councillor Hearn.
Motion.
Councillor Bailey.
Abstention.
Deputy Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Barnacle.
Motion.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Abstain.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Brock.
Amendment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Gray.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth,
Motion.
Councillor James,
Motion.
Councillor Jarvis,
Motion.
Councillor Lang,
Amendment.
Councillor Lyle,
Motion.
Councillor Massey,
Amendment.
Councillor McCall,
Motion.
Councillor McCall,
Amendment.
Councillor McDade,
Abstain.
Councillor McEwen,
Amendment.
Provost,
Motion.
Councillor Parrott,
Amendment.
Councillor Pulver,
Amendment.
Councillor Purvis,
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck,
Amendment.
Councillor Reid,
Motion.
Councillor Robertson,
Abstain.
Councillor Sarwat,
Amendment.
Councillor Shires,
Motion.
Councillor Simpson,
Abstain.
Councillor Smith,
Motion.
Councillor Stewart,
Motion.
Councillor Waters,
Amendment.
Councillor Williamson,
Amendment.
and Councillor Wilson.
Abstain.
Thank you. Members, if you just give me 1 second. Okay, members, thank you very much for your patience there. 17 votes in favour of the motion, 14 in favour of the amendment, and 7 abstentions. So therefore the motion will carry.
Thank you very much, Danny, for doing the clerking there. Thank you. That's the revenue budget passed and the motion is passed. We now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the capital budget. So I will now invite Stuart Mackenzie to introduce the report. Stuart.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I think the Chief Executive was going to say a few words of introduction.
Over to Chief Executive. Beg your pardon.
Deputy Provost, thank you. Provost, thank you, councillors. I am pleased to be able to present this paper on the council's capital budget to you for your consideration. The paper in front of you sets out an update to the 6-year capital delivery programme for the council, which was previously approved by council in March 21 and has been subject of further updates over the last year, the most recent of those on the 2nd of February through SP&R committee. The paper in front of you seeks your approval for investment in a number of existing key asset projects and also looks to ask for consideration and approval for 2 new projects, PH2O and tech-enabled care, to support colleagues within health and social care. Importantly, the paper also seeks your consideration and approval for an exercise to undertake a new corporate asset management strategy for the council and for that to be brought back to council at a future date to allow you to consider how we use our assets and shape our future long-term asset investment plan. Officers will be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. So, are there any questions on this report? I'm just waiting to see any in the chat, or queue in the chat, should I say. It's maybe a wee bit slow at the moment, so has anyone got any questions? If they'd just like to let me know. Councillor Donaldson, I thought you might be first in the queue, so Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Before we move on to, in particular PH2O, I just want to ask, this comes from Strategic Policy and Resources 3 weeks ago. It is an important element of our capital programme, and that's in relation to the Comrie Flood Protection Scheme. And I was disappointed and concerned at what I heard then. I think there have been 1 or 2 developments. Could we be provided with an update on what is happening there?
Are you answering the question?
If I can come in, please, Deputy Provost.
Yes.
Interviews took place last week, and I'm very pleased to say that we've recruited 3 flood technicians and 1 project manager, and the project manager is specifically for the Comrie scheme, and that project manager will start on the 7th of March.
Happy with that answer, Councillor Donaldson?
No, can I just have a follow-up?
Yes, you may.
When is there hope that work may actually start on the scheme on a projected timeline? And is there any possibility, it's 80% funded Scottish Government by the Scottish Government, of cost overruns? And this is not just a local issue, it's in terms of the overall capital programme. So I think it would be helpful to know.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. So the detailed design stage will be complete for Comrie Flood Scheme by summer 2022, and the tender process complete by autumn this year.
Thank you. Councillor Barnacle.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. A couple of points. I don't see any mention anywhere in this paper in the update regarding capital expenditure in Kinross Shire, but I presume the flood schemes include Milnerthorpe and Kinross. So I'm just asking for confirmation on that. And secondly, in the revenue debate, I wasn't very happy with the reply I got regarding a business case for a community bus initiative in the Shire. I wondered whether, in fact, that might be a capital project rather than revenue. And I would just make a plea that it's no point in having a transport group to try and deliver outcomes if there's no money to deliver them, and there doesn't seem to be any.
Thank you, Councillor Barnacle. Barbara, would you like to answer that one, please?
Yep, and certainly. Thank you, Deputy Provost. And Councillor Barnacle, both Kinross and Milnerthorpe flood schemes remain in the budget for 23-24. And in relation to the public transport and the rural transport issue, and again, sort of happy to come back to you with a little bit more detail on those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'm on page 161 of the papers, the table relating to the projects. Whilst the increases in costs for 4 of them seem to be consistent with inflationary pressures, the increase for the primary school at Bertha Park suggests something more than that. I can't see anything in the papers relating to that. My apologies if I've missed something, but is there an explanation for the very substantial increase in the Bertha Park primary school project? Thank you.
Stuart, are you able to answer that question?
Perhaps colleagues in the Education Children's Services are a better place than I am.
Thank you. Is Fraser there and somebody?
I wonder if our head of property is.
Hi Stuart, I can come in there.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, so Councillor Parrott, the specification previously didn't include passive house standards. So the increase in costs are in relation to not only the passive house, but also to do with inflation. Does that answer your question, Councillor Parrott?
Yes, but I thought the increases to the others were also coped with the passive house element too, so it doesn't provide the difference I was seeking, if you like. But I'm prepared to accept that that's the case. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Parrott, your second question, is it related to your first one? Or
I haven't got a second question.
Oh, right. Okay, then. Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My question is not on something in the paper, but on something that's not in the paper. So I had asked previously about accompanying documents around the capital investment, the investment blueprint, sort of such as rules and guidelines, you know, terms of reference for each of the different phases, how scoring would be done where there might be projects which have conflicting priorities in terms of whether they are support maybe economic development or support carbon reduction. And I just wondered where we were with the supporting documents, particularly scoring different, in particular.
Karen Donaldson to answer this question.
In particular, the scoring scheme for different documents. That'd be great. Thank you. For different projects, that'd be great. Thank you.
Before Karen speaks, can I just say there seems to be, we're getting background noise. I don't know whether it's for people in another room that their microphones are on, but we're getting a bit of feedback in here and noise. So whether everyone else is getting it. Karen.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillor Stewart, the response that I gave you at the last time when you asked that question remains the case. That work is still ongoing and has not been fully completed. We want to ensure that there's a comprehensive set of guidance to support all of that. Meanwhile, officers are working their way through that and dealing with that on an incremental basis. So I'll provide an update to members when this work is complete.
And do we have any indication of when that would be complete?
We have a timeline that we're working to. I don't have that in front of me at the moment, Councillor Stewart. I will endeavour to provide that response in due course. Thank you.
That would be great. It's just obviously the investment blueprint was first mentioned, you know, sort of 2 years ago. So it'd be great to get an update on when we might have everything in place for it. Thank you.
It was only approved in October of last year, Councillor Stewart. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I don't see anyone else wishing to ask any questions. So if that is the case, I will now ask Councillor Lyle to move the report. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. The capital budget creates the infrastructure to deliver on the Council's strategic objectives. The motion provides additional funding to secure the delivery of 5 key projects, including Perth High School, Blair Gowrie Recreation Centre, ensuring that we can still deliver them in spite of unforeseeable inflation increases and also construction costs. I am delighted to commit 90 million to the delivery of the PH2O Leisure Vision. This will see the replacement of the Perth Leisure Pool and the Dewar Centre with a major new facility, including large water leisure areas, 2 pools, bowling, ice rink, health spa and family and play facilities, as well as flexible conference space and cafe facilities. These substantial projects will be delivered to passive house standards, a first in Scotland and something that we in Perth and Kinross should rightly be proud of. As you all know, PH2O has been an ambition of this administration. It will deliver key economic, educational, community and health benefits to residents and visitors alike. It will also establish PH2O as a premium leisure facility in Scotland. I am sure that this is an investment which will have support across the chamber today. In addition, I am happy to support all of the recommendations within the report, including the investment in community alarms as part of our ongoing commitment to some of the most vulnerable in our communities. Furthermore, in line with the approach to capital investment and planning, as outlined within the approved investment blueprint, I want to bring forward 2 further proposals for our public transport network infrastructure. These are a park and ride facility at Bertha Park in Verramond and a connect and park facility at Willowgate. I am therefore asking officers to undertake the due diligence and develop a strategic business case, which then can be considered by elected members in due course. Obviously, I'm happy to move the capital budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I invite Councillor Duff to second the motion, please?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm happy to second the Administration's capital budget motion. This paper progresses over £250 million of capital investment in 7 key capital projects across Perth and Kinross, including, I'm delighted to say, support for a new £90 million PH2O project and the first-class facilities which it will bring and the technology-enabled care. Many of the projects, including Perth High School, the Gowrie Recreation Centre and the new PH2O complex, will now be constructed to Passive House standards following the decision of this council over the last 2 years. That decision will now help to significantly reduce the carbon emissions of our property estate in the years to come and be a key contributor to the council's net zero target achievements. Key priority within the council's strategic capital investment planning framework is that of encouraging and supporting sustainable transport and active travel. Council is committed to reducing carbon emissions through investment in more sustainable forms of transport and through its active travel strategy. In that regard, the additional capital investment proposals for a park and ride facility at Bertha Park in Verramond and a park and connect facility at Willowgate, Walnut Grove, both on the outskirts of Perth City, will be a significant step forward, and I look forward to seeing the developed strategic business case. Happy to second, Deputy Provost. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. Councillor Lane, I would invite you for your amendment, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Deputy Provost, and thanks, Councillor Bailey, for letting me go first. Yeah, I will not. It's been a long day, and I'm let others comment on the proposals. I'm fully in support.
I think we might have lost connection from Councillor Lane.
Sorry, I was cut off there.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, am I back in there?
Yes, yes, you are. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Drysdale was just letting me know I was frozen. I have to rewind and come back and say it all again. So thank you for that. This is our amendment, agreeing with all the recommendations in the report, but and I'm asking if instead of going through the whole amendment process, if the Leader of the Council may wish to put this forward again for scrutiny by the strategic business case. This Pillar Terrace embankment is in Perth. It was a project that was the council had agreed to and put out for tender. Unfortunately, the company who was going to do the works, I think, went into administration, and the subsequent pricing for the job was was too high at that time, so it didn't move forward. We kind of promised these residents that something would be done to make this look safe, and I would ask, that's our amendment, but if the Leader Council's wishing to accept this extra item into his, then save go through the process. If not, go through the amendment process, and I'll ask Councillor Rebeck to second.
Thank you. Councillor Rebeck, are you able to second this amendment, please?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I would, and I'll be brief in seconding this amendment. Puller Terrace is probably the unluckiest, well, it's certainly the unluckiest street in Perth City North, probably the unluckiest street in the whole of Perth and Kinross, actually, with issues involving suds ponds which don't seem to be quite right and are certainly not aesthetically appealing, non-maintenance of the grass areas at the back, access problems to the back, which means the bin lorries can't get up, and in one case very distressing for one resident because the hearse couldn't get up to the back either. The worst issue is probably the embankment to the front, which, as has been alluded to, council officers have tried to sort in the past, so there's certainly no implied criticism here of anybody, but it's certainly an eyesore, and I think it's becoming increasingly unsafe as well, with rusty handrails and the concrete in the steps getting a little bit dodgy, and indeed the retaining walls starting to lean at a not a very good angle. So it feels like it's becoming increasingly safe. The residents deserve a little bit of support, and I'm grateful for colleagues in the SNP group for supporting Councillor Massey and I's plea for capital funds to at least go some way in putting things right for them. So I'm happy to second this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite Councillor Bailey with his amendment, please?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm happy to propose this amendment. It's one that shows real ambition. I'm happy to see that there is finally a consensus of support on PH2O. We have to provide proper swimming provision in Perth, and it's through fully funding PH2O that we can achieve that. Our amendment doesn't stop there. It also helps a little with encouraging folk out of their cars onto buses and bikes. It includes support for the park and ride at West Kinfauns, and I see that there's only a minor difference between what I'm calling for here and what the administration are. Park and choose versus park and connect, so that's great. And that supports modal shift in transport into Perth from the east, including Dundee. It also kicks off the important process of providing a dedicated health and wellbeing facility for the residents of the Castle Gowrie, whose GPs lost their permanent base before COVID and have been in a temporary building in the middle of a field ever since. On the subject of the Cross-Tay Link Road, it's only right that we review that against our new net zero commitments. Without a doubt, I believe that if someone came up with the idea today, we'd vote it down without a second thought. We're currently victims of a massive sunk cost fallacy. Essentially, we're throwing good money after bad. Better we review now and reconsider than carry on throwing money at something that won't deliver the expected outcomes. I commend this amendment to the Council. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. And do you have a seconder, Councillor Bailey?
Yes, Councillor McDade, I believe, is ready to second.
Thank you. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yes, I'm very happy to second this amendment. I'm happy that it includes Loughrea Community Campus as a assessment proposal, and that is part of what should be, I hope, the future Council One Public Estate, which I have been campaigning for the past 5 years. I think there's a lot of opportunity to consolidate our assets, and I think Loughrea provides a perfect opportunity where we have a lot of different public buildings that are costing the taxpayer collectively a lot of money, where we could make savings and deliver better services.
Sorry, Councillor McDade, we're not hearing what you're saying.
And similarly, in terms of the Cross-Tay Link Road, this is a review. It is not stopping it. It is merely looking at it and seeing whether it actually does meet with the Scottish Government, the UK Government and our international obligations towards net zero. As Councillor Bailey says, it is quite unlikely, I think, in this day and age that we would vote to build a brand new road through green fields and native woodland. In fact, the budget we were voting on earlier was proposing to include additional tree planting. Well, we could just not dig some up, and that would keep the carbon in the ground and in the trees. It takes 40 years for trees to return the carbon, etc. So there is real potential here to reconsider and look at other ways of doing this. But this is merely a review. We're not asking for anything further than that.
Is that you finished, Councillor McDade?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't see any more amendments coming forward, so I'm proposing that. Peter, Councillor Barrett, you've got a point of clarification.
Yes, thanks very much, Deputy Provost. I just wondered if we could get some clarification as to what the financial implications of taking any or all of these projects forward to strategic business case would be, and what the revenue consequences would be as well, and what impact does it have on the deliverability of developing the existing project, the existing prioritised projects in the programme.
Answer.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Happy to take that. At this case, my understanding is that officers would be asked to take forward them to the strategic business case. So the cost of that would be identified from officers in terms of the development, but there is no capital investment required at this point in time.
And in terms of the capacity to do that, Chief Executive?
Again, Councillor, if it's felt that there's a requirement for additional capacity within the team, that's something that we would look at through delegation, or if necessary, bring a report back to members.
Okay. Deputy Provost, if I might interrupt, just to say that given that it's late in the day and I know where we are, I would ask for a short recess just to had the opportunity to discuss this with colleagues. I'm aware we have two amendments of differing in nature, so I think rather than the amendments going against one another, etc., it might be prudent just to take a short recess till we cement our position on the issues.
Councillor Lyle, that is just about what I was about to propose. I was going to propose we have a 15-minute recess and start again at 4:30, but I think we'll need to go a wee bit, needs to be 25 to 5 now because we've kind of got 3 minutes. So 15-minute recess from 16:18. Thank you very much. Please do not leave the meeting, just put your cameras off and sound off and that'll be fine. Thank you.
Oh, joy. We're getting there.
Hello. I think.
Afternoon, Willie. We're still live, remember.
Live and alive. Yep.
Alive.
I said good afternoon. That's a fairly neutral.
Nice to hear a sound. I thought I was having problems again.
Proof of life, I think they call it.
Thank you. Yes. Somebody's texted me to fill in one of the forms during this.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Councillors, are we all ready to recommence? So we're over to questions. Now I see, Councillor Wilson, your comment or question has been answered in the recess. You will withdraw your question. Okay, thank you for your comment. Thank you very much. So Sheila McCall, Councillor McCall, you're first to have a comment. Sheila.
Thank you. Just give me a second. I'm just getting myself back here. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. So my comment really is about the PH2O project. As the councillor for Ward 10, where the Perth Leisure Pool Endure Centre is located, I welcome that we're finally seeing some progress on the PH2O project to replace these facilities. However, I would ask that the record reflects that the genesis for this project did not commence in February 2019 as is stated in the papers with this administration, but when the council was instructed to develop the strategic business case, but it was developed much earlier than that, and it was initiated during the term of the previous SNP administration. The decision not to proceed with any immediacy at the start of this council term was one taken by this Tory administration and supported by their coalition partners at that time, the Liberal Democrat group, including, regrettably, the Tory and Lib Dem councillors for Ward 10. Such has been the inertia in this project that over the past 4.5 years, I have felt like the sole ward councillor representing the residents of Perth City South in championing the PH2O project. The prevarication on this project has not only denied the residents in my ward, and indeed throughout Perth and Kinross, access to modern and fit-for-purpose leisure facilities, it has also incurred additional and avoidable operating and maintenance costs for Live Active Leisure. Layered on top of this is the financial impact of Brexit and COVID that will further add to the negative cost impact to the council, all of which could have been mitigated if the administration and Liberal Democrats had the political will to prioritise this project at the start of this term in 2017. Nevertheless, we are where we are. So I welcome the progress that has been made in completing the strategic business case and thank officers for their time and endeavour in this work. I look forward to seeing the detailed project plan that will deliver PH2O by 2027. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I really do feel I have to challenge Councillor McCall's erroneous version of events, because my accurate recollection is that the previous administration put forward a capital sum against this project and then did absolutely nothing thereafter other than tell Live Active Leisure to see if they could raise some money for the project. There was no design work, there was no strategic business case, there was absolutely nothing done to take this project forward over a number of years. So I think really need to set the record straight on that matter. £90 million commitment in sport and leisure facilities represents a huge investment in our community, in our young people and people of all ages. In fact, in active lifestyles and healthier living, it is a huge undertaking. And in supporting option 1, I believe that we will deliver a new state-of-the-art facility which meets our climate change and climate emergency ambitions in terms of its passive performance. It will be a key attraction to Perth, increasing visitor numbers and spend in the city centre. Some of the budget proposals floated today might suggest that there is a bottomless pit or a magic money tree at some councillors' disposal. I would want to dispel that notion as well. I've never seen a funding mechanism which requires ring fencing of future growth in council tax on such a scale, combined with such significant year-on-year increases in the loans fund. And revenue impacts and political courage and character will be required in order to see that through. And I think that's in precious supply across this chamber, but certainly we can commit to ensuring that that happens. Provost, I want to confirm on behalf of my colleagues that the Liberal Democrat group support the increase in the budgets for Perth High School. Councillors Liz Barrett and Willie Wilson were instrumental in pressing for a new high school from even before it reached the list of projects on the capital programme and was even on the design table. And we also support the additional funding of Blair Gowrie Rec, the primary school at Bertha Park and the flooding schemes at paragraph 5.12. Provost, we're happy to support the development of the strategic business cases for the park and ride at Bertha Park, which is consistent with our vision for the Dunkeld Road corridor, for the park and connect at Willowgate to encourage modal shift and reduce vehicles travelling into Perth city centre, which will assist in realising the benefits of the Cross-Tail Link Road. We do not support a review of that project, despite it being Councillor Bailey's second time of asking in recent memory. I hope it meets with the same response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett. Now, Councillor Lyle, I notice you've got a C in the box, but you will get your chance to sum up at the end.
Yep, and I will take that opportunity. I wish to withdraw. Thank you.
OK, thank you. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'm delighted to see PH2O in the papers today and will be fully supportive of option 1. This is a project that we need for all of the people in Perth and Kinross and as an offer that we can make to people from Firth of Perth and Kinross. And to that end, I would like to express the wish and the sincere hope at this stage that PH2O can be directly linked with new access to the new transport hub when that project comes about, either through passive provision initially or built at the same time if PH2 happens to be running parallel with developments at the railway station and the transport hub. We must make PH2O as easily accessible by public transport as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Wilson, you said you didn't need to make a comment, but now I see you've got a C in the box. So you changed your mind? Or was the last one to be a question?
The last one was concerning another item.
Right, OK. Right, very good.
First of all, I welcome Councillor Andrew Parrott's positive remarks about the development of PH2O. I think he's hit the button right on the nail there. However, I want to correct Councillor McCall's assertion that this has been unduly delayed. There have been good reasons for the delay. First of all, was to find feasibility study. Secondly, to find sources of funding. and thirdly, for it to be enabled in a way that will protect the energy consumption and also the benefits of the ice rink and the swimming pool being virtually back to back. If we'd proceeded with undue haste, we might have missed out some of these opportunities. And I, for one, am in no way apologetic about making sure we get the scheme right and correct, and it will be of huge benefit, as Andrew Parrott has just described, to the whole of Perth and Kinross, and in fact to mid-central Scotland as well as a leisure facility. So I've no hesitation in supporting the proposals today. Option one, it would be, I think, a big mistake to go for a smaller scheme. I think if we're going to do this, we do it properly. History will not judge us well if we come up with a scheme that is really halfway there, in my opinion. But I totally reject Councillor Sheila McCall's assertions, and I think that she's trying to claim credit for something that the council have developed. It's taken time, but I think at the end of the day, we've got a much better product. And I would reflect Councillor Peter Barrett's comments. I was campaigning for Perth High School replacement as soon as we got the agreement to replace Oakbank Primary School, and that's approximately 12 years ago. We're still got to approve the planning application for Perth High School. So these things take time. I know Councillor McCall's still a bit inexperienced in terms of how councils work, but nonetheless, these things do take time and sometimes patience, but nonetheless, good planning is at the essence of what we do. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Liz Barrett, please.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. First, I'd like to give my thanks to all the officers who've been involved in the BRG groups and all the preparations for today's meeting and have provided support throughout the meeting. It's been a long haul, and thank you all very much. I'm very pleased that we've identified funding at last to enable us to invest in PH2O, and I look forward to option one being a great asset to our fair city and to my ward. Not only will it provide great facilities for the current swimming, bowling and our world-beating curling, I welcome the variety of new activities being proposed for families and visitors and the continuing availability for events and conferences and a great reduction in our carbon emissions. We know that times are tight, but this is a fantastic opportunity to invest in an attractive destination for local residents and for visitors, and I'm very pleased to be supporting option one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pulver.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute there. Thanks very much, Deputy Provost. I just wanted to put on record that my support for a permanent health facility in the Carsagowrie. I think that's long overdue, as it's been already stated. But just to say that I don't necessarily support the Cross-Tay Link Road proposals as part of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pulver, and my apologies to Councillor Braun.
That's fine, Deputy Provost. Don't worry.
My eyes are beginning to get a wee bit too tired.
I won't hold it against you. I won't hold it against you. Don't worry. Thank you. Thank you, Provost. I'll be reasonably quick. I'm pleased that Council has agreed to continue the support for the new recreation centre in Blairgowrie. Excuse me. Currently at the formal planning stage and set for completion in winter 2023. This will be a cutting-edge passive house design. Excuse me. And will stand for decades to come, a final product of great benefit to the town and to East Perthshire as a whole. I know many mentioned that this started as a £17 million allocation in the balance sheet some years ago, but as far as I've been aware, there was no architectural design, no business case, no consultation with user groups. Indeed, there was no definitive proof that the amount was even sufficient in the first place. But let us be clear, that was a dream supported by a figure on a balance sheet. What is happening now, what is to be built in Blairgowrie, what this administration has done, that is real and that is reality. Turning to PH2O, as a member of the board, I'm very pleased that we have given approval for this project to finally go ahead. I'm sure that the other directors would wish me to thank all officers for all the work that's been done to get to this point today. This has taken time, but with a budget of some 90 million, it must be right first time. And this administration takes that seriously, ensuring that a project of this size can be funded properly. I think it's also right to thank all members of the board for their diligence, their perseverance and their patience as they work to get this project off the drawing board and into reality. All are passionate about the health and well-being of the people of Perth and Kinross, to which this new centre will play such an important part. And I should include Mike Robinson, former chair of LAO, who gave unceasing support throughout this time on the board, throughout his time on the board. And it would be ungracious of me not to include my fellow councillors, Councillor Rebeck and Councillor McEwen, who both give their support, and of course Councillor Robertson and indeed Councillor Lang, who was passionately supporting this when he was on the board. I have no doubt that some, if not all, I would suspect all, the directors have been listening into this meeting, awaiting a clear, positive decision, hanging on with bated breath, holding their breath even. And I'm sure they will forgive me for using the line when I say you've got a bunch of guys who are about to turn blue, but they're breathing again. I'm sure other members wish to comment, and I hope they will agree this is now time to celebrate. Thank you, Provost. Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I shall be brief and I shall refer back to the debate this morning when I referenced this project, the PH2O project, and the dither and delay that has affected the operation of this council in recent years. We've heard different versions of history from my colleagues on the SNP group and from Councillor Peter Barrett during this debate. But what is undoubtedly the case, and can't be spun any other way, is that I'm sitting here looking at an update that we got from officers just 5 short months ago, when the final costs of this project were indicated at between 70 and 80 million. And a similar update a year previously was around 70 million. We're now at 85 to 90 million. And you can see the significant increase in cost because of the slippage in the progress of this project. And that's before we even think about the horrendous energy costs and the carbon footprint that is resulting from the highly inefficient operation of the leisure pool up until now, and that obviously will continue for a number of years still, and until the new facility is ready. So all in all, I'm wholly supportive of this project and the other projects in this paper, but I just wish we'd got our act together some considerable time ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Drysdale. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. This is indeed a very good news story for the people of Perth and Kinross, that eventually, at long last, we are going forward with the PH2O project. As you'll probably be aware, I was involved as chair of Live Active Leisure a few years back, and at that time I was, and as now, I'm totally in favour of developing a new state-of-the-art facility at the site, for all the reasons that everyone said. I'm really disappointed though that both Councillors Drysdale and McCall have decided to pour vinegar on something that should have leave us with a really good taste in their mouths. And I'm sorry, I've been a councillor for a number of years now, and I know that this was proposed before there was a Lib Dem Conservative administration, and it sat in the books, and the SNP administration at that time did absolutely nothing. They put some money in the budget, but never did anything to take it forward. And it was only in the last few years that the next administration decided to take it forward and build up a business case for it. So, but we shouldn't be blaming past administrations and being negative about it. We should rejoice in this facility. We're talking earlier on this afternoon, or this morning it was now, about the wonderful performances of our gold and silver Olympic medalists, Eve Muirhead in her rink and Bruce Mowat in his rink. And we should be celebrating that, and to be announcing that we're taking this forward on that very day
is a great thing. So let's make it a good news story and not have any more negative comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robertson, for being so positive. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Convener, Deputy Provost. I do apologise. Yeah, I'm in a position now where we're at the end of the meeting, and Councillor McDade this morning mentioned that he was at school with Eve Muirhead. Unfortunately, I was at the school, Pitlochry High School, when the present one was getting built. I fully support Councillor McDade's proposals, but unfortunately I can't support them with whilst incorporated with the Crosstay Road link.
Thank you. Is that your comments finished, Councillor Williamson?
It is.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know whether you had been cut off. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your comments, and now I will ask the movers of the motion and the amendment to sum up. So, Councillor Bailey, you'll be first. Thank you. Councillor Bailey?
Yep, sorry, Deputy Provost, I was fighting with my unmute button there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to sum up. It's late in the day, so I think all I'll say is just to put on record the fact that the group I sit in with, the Independents, has consistently shown funding for PH2O, and very happy to see it. Finally, there's consensus across the chamber. With regard to the capital amendment we have, I've heard people asking today why the Crosstay Link Road is back on there. I think it's because I'm happy to die in a ditch trying on this thing. We're in a climate emergency right now, not a climate hiccup, not a climate mild headache. We're in a climate emergency, and the amount of carbon this will create during its construction and afterwards just means that I think if someone proposed this today, as I said earlier, we'd vote it down without a thought. So that's why I'd like to put this to the vote again, please, if you can entertain that, Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lane.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I would support all the extra proposals to be put into be costed and rated. I think that would be the way forward. Unfortunately, I cannot support the Independent Labour amendment because of the inclusion of the Crosstay Road link review. Obviously welcome the big ticket items that have been kicking around for a while, and I've had a lot to say trying to push them forward, and I'm delighted to see that these sporting facilities and educational facilities are going to be moving forward. I was been on the board of Live Active Leisure from 2012 through to became leader of the SNP group in 2019, so I do know the chronology and I do know how it worked. And I'm not going to blame anybody for the time it takes. It's just unfortunate that if we'd taken a decision maybe a year or so before, it might have saved some money moving forward, which is a moot point now. And I'm glad to see we move it. It will be 5 years or so, maybe 6. Could be not this, the next administration, but the next administration that will be opening it. And there might be quite a few of us not around to enjoy it or to be there. However, in the previous administration, a lot of time the funding was LAL led, and LAL were trying to find the funding. They were trying to find it from Sports Scotland, were trying to get it from Garnacky, they were trying to get it from us. So it wasn't that nothing was done and the business case wasn't done. That was LAL's job back then. It wasn't the previous administration. We were there and put money in to support it. So I just wanted to clear that we didn't sit around waiting for something to happen, which is some people are trying to rewrite history and say they were. I missed one LAL board meeting in 9 years, and I've got a reasonable memory, so I know exactly how the thing progressed. What I'd like, so without blaming MD or retrospectively of that, is I'm really glad for all these hard-working people, officers of LAL. Mike Robinson was the last chair. Jim Moyes was the last chief executive. We've now got Paul Cromwell. They will be extremely glad. We've got something that Perth and Kinross will be proud of. It will be something that will be a visitor attraction, but mainly it's something for our own residents. We hear so much about bringing people into Perth that is so important that we seem to lose sight of. We build things, we do things for our own residents to enjoy first and foremost. And if anybody else wants to come and use this facility, that's a bonus. This is for the people of Perth and Kinross, and I wholeheartedly welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lane. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. As the witching hour of 5 o'clock, we are nearing the end of the day. Just one or two comments from the amendments that came forward. I'm happy to incorporate the SNP amendment and into the motion going forward from that perspective. And I note the comments, and I'm slightly disappointed by the comments from Councillor McCall and Councillor Drysdale, that on a day really when we should be celebrating the formal funding of this project, they appear to be so embittered by the challenges. One of the benefits of this delay, and I'm aware from Councillor Lane's comments that you know, initially this was a LAL project, not a council project, but one of the benefits of this is that we are going to build this facility to passive house standards, which in the long term will be a huge saving to the council and of benefit to us. So I just like to make these comments, and also I agree with the thoughtful comments from Councillor Parrott about connectivity and the rail network in particular. It's something that we should be aware of during the design phase of the building, and hopefully that ScotRail will be similarly aware of our issues when they come to do their work. As far as the other amendment from the Independent Labour Group is concerned, I'm not minded to accept that, and possibly if Councillor Bailey was minded that for as far as the Castle Gowrie facility is concerned, he might want to contact our colleagues in the NHS to see if they were willing to support the project. So with that, I don't wish to add any more, and I wish to thank you all again for your time, and I'm happy to move forward to a vote.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you all very much for your contributions to the capital budget debate. Now we'll move to the vote.
Provost, Deputy Provost, it was just to, I think formally that you would have to ask myself and Councillor Rebick if we withdraw our amendment.
You are absolutely right, Councillor Wing. Thank you for keeping me right. It's very much appreciated at this hour. So can I ask if you're willing to formally withdraw your amendment?
Yes, Provost, I'm extremely happy to do that.
Thank you. And your seconder likewise?
Likewise, Deputy Provost, thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to the vote.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. Thank you, members. So in light of that, the vote will be between the motion as proposed by Councillor Lyle and seconded by Councillor Duff, and the amendment as proposed by Councillor Bailey and seconded by Councillor McDade. So members, in accordance with section 21 of the Council Standing Orders, I'm going to take a roll call vote. You can let me know whether you'll be voting for the motion, the amendment, or whether you'll be abstaining. Councillor Hearn.
Motion.
Councillor Bailey.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Barnacle.
Abstain.
Councillor Barrett.
Motion.
Sorry, that was Councillor Liz Barrett. Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Oh.
Motion.
Councillor Brown.
Motion.
Councillor Brock.
Get my amendment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Gray.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Jarvis.
Motion.
Councillor Lang.
Motion.
Councillor Lyle.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor McDade.
Amendment.
Councillor McEwen. Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Parrott.
Motion.
Councillor Pulver.
Abstain.
Councillor Purvis.
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck.
Motion.
Councillor Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Sarwat.
Motion.
Councillor Shires.
Motion.
Councillor Simpson.
Motion.
Councillor Smith.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Motion.
Councillor Williamson.
Abstain.
And Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
So, members, thank you very much for that. Now, 32 votes in favour of the motion, 3 in favour of the amendment, and 3 abstentions. So, therefore, the motion will carry.
Thank you all very much, and that's really good that this capital budget has had such a great endorsement from all council members today. If you can recall, way back earlier this morning, there was a notice of motion. So that, can I invite Councillors Bailey and McDade to move and second the motion? So, Councillor Bailey.
Yep. It's been a long day and I don't want to derail things now. So before we reach to the end of the line, I'd be chuffed a bit if people would support my motion to put in a bid for the Great British Railways headquarters to come to Perth. And with that, I commend the motion to the council, please. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bailey, for being so brief. It was very welcome at this time of day. Councillor McDade.
Yes, Deputy Provost, thank you. I shall also be mercifully short, which is just to say this is a great opportunity for Perth, Perthshire and Kinrossshire to bring high quality, good paying jobs to Perth and Kinross, and I would hope that the council can unanimously agree this and that we can put in a very strong bid as to why it should be based here in Perth.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any comments? I noticed that there are 1 or 2 in the box. Councillor McEwen, motion running on time. I won't make any comment about train times, but it's good the motion's on time. Anyone wish to make any comment? If there is no comment, can we just agree the motion? Agree the motion?
Agree the motion.
Agreed. Thank you very much for that. That is very welcome at this time of day, and we will try to keep it all to timetable as we are doing with this meeting. So at this stage, I will hand you over to the Provost for the valedictory for Gordon Patterson. Provost.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillors, before bringing today's meeting to a close, it would be remiss of me not to take the opportunity to mark the fact that this is the last council meeting for Gordon Patterson. He was our Health and Social Care Partnership Chief, our Health and Social Care Partnership Chief Officer, and he is now leaving us later this month to take up a new post. As many of you will know, Gordon joined us in May 2019, taking up the challenging role of Chief Officer of Perth and Kinross HSCP. In doing so, he also became an integral part of the Council's executive management team as Director of Adult Care, and similarly within NHS Tayside. You could say he was he has his own holy trinity, and with 3 chiefs to please, he must have the patience of a saint. Gordon has had a long career in public service, working in a range of social work practices, management and leadership roles over the past 35 years. As well as working in the Scottish Government for 2 years as a policy manager for social work and social care, he held the post of Chief Inspector for Adult Services in the Care Inspectorate for 5 years, before being appointed to the role of Chief Officer here in Perth and Kinross in 2019. In this challenging role, he oversees the delivery of primary care community health care and social care services, deploying 1,600 staff. Not an easy job at the best of times,
but for the last 2 years he has also led the partnership's response to the COVID pandemic, working tirelessly with our partners and staff to protect and support many of our most vulnerable residents. For all that, he has contributed both personally and professionally, and I would like to offer my sincere thanks on behalf of the Council to Gordon and to wish him well as he leaves to be reunited with our former Chief Executive, Karen Reid, in his new role as Director at NHS Education for Scotland. Gordon, our very best wishes to you in your new position, and thank you for all your help and advice. And I'm sure my council colleagues and office and staff will all agree. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Provost.
Councillor Drysdale, I understand you've got something to say.
Oh yes, I certainly do. Thank you, Provost. I gave a valedictory at the Integration Joint Board last week, and I think you must have been listening because some of that stuff that you just used was in it. But the truth of the matter is here that you know, I work, as we all do, with a number of officers. Gordon is undoubtedly an excellent officer who has served the people of Perth and Kinross with this distinction in his time in post. It's a very, very difficult post. We all wear different hats at different times. Gordon has to wear 3 hats, one with the Health and Social Care Partnership, one with the Council and one with NHS Tayside. And he has carried out his executive responsibilities in an exemplary fashion throughout. And as you say, Provost, nobody knew when Gordon was appointed in early 2019 that we were about to face a pandemic. And as I know all officers have, but Gordon in particular was directly involved in decisions of life and death in terms of service provision during the height of lockdown and the pandemic. But I could go on for ages. I'm not going to. But I did, in preparation for my speech, ask various of Gordon's colleagues what they thought, what stories they had. I was looking for something juicy to embarrass him with, but what I got back was some really, really excellent comments from staff who indicated that he was the best boss they had ever worked for and how much they would miss him hugely. I wouldn't say Gordon was completely flawless. He is unfortunately a Celtic supporter, but apart from that, you know, he's pretty much a good guy, and I too will miss him hugely. And thank you, Gordon, for our working relationship that we've had during my time as chair and your time as chief officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. That was an excellent review of Gordon's work with you, because you've worked very closely with him. And for a Dundee supporter not to support him, I think that's a shame. But never mind, Gordon. So lovely. Could I have Councillor Lyle this time, please?
Thank you very much, Provost. As we're all aware, it's almost 3 years since Gordon followed Karen Reid over from the Care Inspectorate and joined the council. And I'm aware that the challenge that he took on in coming to our IGB was significant, and he was aware of that when he came. I have to say, Gordon has worked tirelessly to transform that organisation and make it for purpose, which he has done, and credit to him for that. Working for 3 masters with NHS Tayside, the IGB and Perth and Kinross Council is a balancing act, which Gordon, I can only say, has managed admirably and with some agility. On top of all the work that he's had to do reforming the organisation, he's had the small issue of COVID-19, lockdowns, pandemic, etc. And I really wish to give all credit to him for the tireless endeavour and the organisation and skill that he's shown in steering us through these issues. I'd finally like to briefly again just wish Gordon all the best in his next position in NHS education as he follows again Karen Reid into the next post. But I would finally like to thank him sincerely for his service to Perth and Kinross Council. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Provost. Well, like Gordon, I've worked at the St Andrew's House. I've worked in the health service, and I hope I can accord that I've worked with the council for many years. But Gordon, I've never done all three of them all at once, and for that I think we want to pay you tribute. The triumvirate of these organisations and the ones that you've served, including the IGB, isn't easy, and you've done that with a high degree of professionalism, with good humour, and very good management skills. Our loss will be NHS education's gain by every account. We all wish you well. We hope you're successful in your new post, and I'm sure you will be. And we're sorry you're leaving. We'll miss you, but all the very best in the future. Thank you for your diligence and your service.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Lane, please.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'll be very succinct for a change. I'd like to thank Gordon for all the help and information he supplied us. It's been an extremely difficult job, and I think that Eric Drysdale's wife is concerned that they've had a bromance going on with the amount of time that they've spent on the phone discussing matters IJB. I would like to wish Gordon all the luck moving forward. If he has as much luck as his football team had last week, he'll be pretty well off for the foreseeable. But good luck, Gordon. You don't need the luck. You've got the capability, and I'll speak for as others across the chamber have spoken. We will miss you, and all the best. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lane. Are there any other contributions? No. Gordon, would you like to say a few words before you
very
depart?
Briefly. Yeah, thanks, Provost. Very briefly, thank you all for those kind remarks. I think it's been acknowledged that I'm going to work with Karen Reid for the third time, and that's probably another hat-trick, Councillor Lane. Sorry, that's a football reference for colleagues who might not be up to speed. I don't want to take up any time. I just want to thank you sincerely for those kind comments, and to thank councillors for the support that I've had during my 3 years here. It hasn't been without its challenges, and I do leave though with a bit of regret, because I think the Health and Social Care Partnership has great potential, much to offer, and can make a considerable difference in improving outcomes for the people of Perth and Kinross. I would have felt it probably much more difficult to leave if we were in the midst of a further wave of the pandemic, and like everyone else here, I sincerely hope that we're now seeing the demands of the pandemic subside, and we can now move from response to recovery. Finally, just to wish you all the very best, every success, and the best of health, and I will keenly keep an eye on how the council develops into the future. So thank you all very much, and thank you for your support.
Thank you very much, Gordon. Members, thank you very much for an excellent long day, but we managed to get through it. I'd like to say a big thank you to our IT team, our officers and our staff, and in particular to my Deputy Provost for doing a great job today, and also to the Chief Executive and Head of Legal here keeping us all right. So thank you very much. Enjoy your evening when you get home. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost.